Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm, and you are watching third and final part of What If Kid Naruto was the bloodthirsty demon. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Always taking no more time. Let's start the story.
Neji had claimed that Naruto was allowing her to take advantage of him, but Naruto had not denied that he was mistaken. She never transformed into that just tore into little animals like there was no tomorrow, so it seemed that her cousin hadn't killed her, but it was a close call. To the surprise of the medical staff, she was still required to remain in bed and not move until her organs had healed themselves. The medics were informed by Anko, who remained with her, that it's a reflexive jutsu, she'll be tired but functional in just a little bit. Just give her the bed. No, she doesn't need painkillers. She kind of wished that last bit hadn't been said by Anko, not because of the organs, which hurt a lot but were quickly getting better, but because she was still upset about Naruto's deal with Neji and had read somewhere that taking ibuprofen for heartache had been shown to lessen emotional pain because it was felt in some of the same places as physical pain. But it was true. God, he was able to provide for two people while she was having fun and not even making an effort to reduce her expenses. This was really screwed up. Neji could even see it. Her cousin came in and pointed it out as if it were so obvious that they hadn't spoken in months. Why hadn't she seen it earlier? Hey! Through the curtain surrounding her cot, Naruto's outline was visible. The others had left to oversee the remaining altercations. You okay? Can I come in? Her voice broke. Sure. Are you upset because I interrupted the match? We didn't want you to get hurt more, he said as he walked straight through the curtain section and approached her. Let him believe that was the issue. I was losing anyway, so it's not like it was gonna make a difference. He would most likely become defensive and conceal the bills from her or something if she brought up spending. He smiled reassuringly and said, it's just the first exam. I wasn't even supposed to pass my first one. That was a fluke. You'll get better. You think so? She closed her eyes to relish the sensation of his initiating the kiss. He reached up to gently hold her, scooting so his thigh was against her hip and massaging her scalp. She was in a delicate state, blah blah blah, but he was warm and kind. God, she wished he were nearer. He pushed her away as soon as she sat up and grunted as she approached him, saying, easy, you're still hurt. So kiss me better. Surprisingly, he did as he was told, and he was on all fours above her, getting onto the bed. His blue eyes were piercing her, and he was snickering when she smiled broadly in appreciation for his initiative. You look cheered. She suppressed the smile and drew him down for a moist kiss, then took a sharp breath through her nose as something new began to pique her interest. Chakra was the thing, the chakra of Naruto. Although she was aware of it, this felt wonderful, like a hug, a massage, or a euro. Oh, his hips digging into hers, and she experienced a brief sensation of her core pulsing in reaction to the friction. A euro, like something better. In order to hook her knees over his thighs, she wriggled back from him after pushing him away and grabbing onto his shirt to keep him from moving too far. After the adjustment, he was back on top of her, and she was pretty sure he was hard, except that his dumb belt, which was heavy with scrolls, was causing her stomach to ache. He appeared to sense her unease and retreated, hovering over her as they shared a kiss, small weapons, keys, and other objects clinking in the air between them. Encouraged by the startled sound he made, she felt a little bold and extended her hand to run it over the crotch of his pants. She rubbed more vigorously. Abruptly, the chakra became more intense, and the amazing pain in her pelvis grew stronger. His flush moved from his cheeks to his neck and under his shirt, and she watched in fascination. There's only one way to find out where it ends. That was a stutter. And no, he pushed her hand away from his vest zipper and said, we gotta stop. That was the most whiny sound ever. Why? For one T. Ignoring the terrible digging of all his front pockets and belt this time, she sat up and pushed him back until he landed on his butt and had to sort of rock forward to balance. When he got close, she caught his mouth and bounced into his lap to press her crotch against his. He said, you smell really good. Even though he had been arguing for the opposite, his hands gently cupped her back, keeping her upright and against him. She used her thumbs to trace his jaw and the lines on his cheeks, kissing slowly and softly as she enjoyed his reactions and the delectable way his chakra swirled over her skin and around her. Hinata, he began once more, but not with much conviction. The medics had her change into a clean pajama shirt because her bra had too much blood on it to be hygienic, and she pushed her tongue into his mouth, saying, God, the taste, she could die. Then, as if by magic, his fingers were pressing into her, one winding in her hair and the other feeling under the clean pajama shirt. She can concentrate on this new sense of power passing over her because they aren't being so demanding anymore and are simply settling into an intimate pattern of kissing and groping a little bit. Every second or so she gyrates and his response is magnificent. Unlike when they fight, it's not angry, it resembles another him, more like when his own clone had pressed her against him on the bridge. It was all around her, taunting her, sending slow, sensual pulses and tiny bursts of energy where his fingers touched her skin beneath the shirt. She senses it from the way her hips are rubbing against his, and from his hands it tickles when he caresses her breast and seeps into her through his kisses. Then he withdrew. She sighed and followed him, saying, "Please don't stop this," and he returned immediately. It was thrilling to have him on her in this state. And he could sense it too, touching him and sensing his arousal rising to meet hers was incredibly satisfying. She wasn't a total waste of his money. If she could make him groan like that, give her a similar kiss in return. His body suddenly weighed her down as he pushed forward, dropping her onto the squat infirmary mattress. The way he kept slamming his hips into hers compensated for the foolish Chunin Vest's deeper than comfortable dig into her boob. He put his fingers in hers and simply kissed her lips and neck slowly while breathing heavily and tapping his forehead against hers. Each exhale cooled her through the cotton and struck her chest. If we weren't in an exam building, now would probably be a great time to ask him to bang. His entire face was flushed. It was cute. Hinata Euro, he sounded vaguely irritated. "Can we go home yet?" Frowning, he said, "I have to go back?" "You're still hard, though, I know. What are you gonna do?" Leaning away from her, he said, "I'm going to the bathroom." "Can I come?" "No." The room was empty as she swiftly looked around for anyone else using her Byakugan. Either their groaning had scared off anyone else, or they had always been by themselves. After arguing and biting her lip, she squirmed under the sheet and tried her best to complete the task at hand. Nothing seemed to be going well on this test. After a quick, "It's a bloodline or something, the Hokage and I have talked about it, don't worry." Naruto had left Anko and returned to the infirmary to see his girlfriend, but she was too intelligent for that. At the very least, she was aware that demonic energy would appear near her twice in a week, and she knew better than to ignore it. It had been her old sensei. Her skin crawled. She knew it was a bad idea to put Sasuke Uchiha in the spotlight after they had blown their asses with security on this exam. However, Orochimaru achieved his goal, and it seems that raising hell was on the list this time. She surmised that he might not have been directly involved in this incident, but it was still possible. After all, Naruto was the Kyuubi container, but that should have been tightly sealed. Its contents are not a container. She knew Naruto was a good kid, so she wasn't a moron. She simply didn't have much faith in him. Spying on two children sucking their faces made Anko feel a little uneasy, but she reminded herself that it was in a location where they had no business doing it, and that security was another factor to take into account. Her thoughts were interrupted by a 16-year-old's moan, which caused her to gag slightly across from her. Her attention was drawn more intently to the cement between the bricks, spread out nicely, very even, and the bricks looked good in this color. Why was she here again? Soon enough. The answer appeared as a chakra pulse from within the room, causing her toes to curl as she felt it go through her. Her former sensei's assigned reading from months ago suddenly returned. One thing they have in common is using their energy and that of others to affect the environment, either physically or spiritually. The simplest way to possess a subject is to appeal to its desires, of which lust, anger, and envy are some of the best examples. However, most of this was ignored in favor of the all-consuming, Naruto as one. She was acquainted with Naruto. She believed she did. Anyway, she knew both of them sufficiently, though not as well as she knew Ino. They were decent children. Anko recoiled once more as Hinata made an applauding sound. She had recovered more quickly than any human could. She could also infer why Naruto was radiating so much of that cursed chakra, since she was aware of how alluring the chakra of the person you were bonded to could feel. Her sensei enjoyed reminding her of what she was lacking whenever they met. She had worked hard to avoid needing it, but if Hinata was just like her. Hell, was the girl even aware of what was happening? Anko began at that point and was about to speak up when Naruto interrupted her by saying, "We gotta stop." It wasn't until she felt her own relief at his words that she realized how upset she was about this. He wasn't trying to control the girl. She thought of a sobering, depressing conversation she'd had with Kurenai. Not everyone is him, Anko. Naruto was a decent youngster. Her sensei wasn't him. Anko retreated as quickly as she could, the shivering sensation from watching teenagers returning. As she sat on the balcony watching the children fight once more, she thought, a couple things are for certain, though. My sensei has returned to town. Naruto Uzumaki is more than just a container for demons. She glanced at the red-haired boy from Suna and said, and something a euro is going to hit the fan real soon. There was nothing more satisfying than seeing his pupil shudder in terror. Naruto flinched as Yamato smiled a hello. It was amazing how predictable it was. Hello, pupil, he said with a smile, almost smelling the perspiration dripping off the child's skin. Geez, he was in T&I. Why was he still having such an impact on him? What brings you here? Nice to see you, too. This was probably the cherry on top. We're going to be playing around with your chakra today, Yamato said, shrugging. I have to be here as insurance. His student's mouth twisted unpleasantly. No doubt the Naruto had been dreading it plenty before he'd seen his hated sensei, and a week had passed since the little show of chakra that had the Hokage rearranging his schedule to make this work. He might have overdone the intimidation, but he didn't have much time to consider that because the door opened and 4 more people entered, including the Hokage and the Great Toad Sage. With greetings being exchanged as they arrived, it would be problematic if Naruto detested him too much. We're going to look at your chakra, Naruto, if you're uncomfortable with it. Jiraiya began cautiously. We definitely need your shirt to come off, and it would be helpful for you to lose your pants and shoes, too. Everyone tried to make small talk to make it less awkward, but it didn't work, so Naruto kicked off his shoes and began undressing in the corner. What comes next? The boy was genuinely unsure of what to do with his arms, so he crossed them, uncrossed them, and then crossed them again in front of him. He hunched over a little, his ears getting pink from being mostly nude in front of a good number of people, at least most of whom he knew along with the Hokage and the Sannin. There was a woman he knew Naruto worked with a Euro. Her name escaped him, but she occasionally appeared in his files because she had studied under Orochimaru when he wasn't yet a traitor at Euro. Not the girl Naruto shared a home with, most likely one of her cousins. Lie down on the sheet here and just hold still. No oil. Not today. The task for which he had come. Yamato, please sit down. All right, Anko will send you some chakra. It may not feel as pleasant as usual because it's a little different. Her name was Anko, all right. She put a gentle hand on Naruto's shoulder and focused. There it was. The sensation of demonic chakra made him want to stifle it, but he restrained his own abilities so they could watch. It took a moment for the boy to notice, but when he felt an unidentified demonic chakra touch his, he jumped to greet it, nearly circling Anko before Yamato had to leap in and grab it. All right, Naruto, do you sense that? He inquired. Continue. I know you want to let it go, but don't simply maintain it at the surface so we can examine it. Yamato was able to unwind once more after he did. Well done, youngster. It's a tumultuous situation. It appears poised to strike. That's why the Hyuga was here. Well, seeing it firsthand gave you a better picture than merely speculating. Jiraiya was such a mother hen to this child. The moment he was offended, the sage stepped in to make things right. It's nothing to worry about. We thought this might happen. You wondered what might occur. After the merger, depicted in your memories, your chakra rose, though not as much as it should have. It's catching up now, but it's a little more strange than anticipated. Is it coming out with bursts of emotion? Scowled Yamato, not constantly shooting his control and overflowing. Now that he was safely away from the child, Anko frowned and trembled a little. Demonic chakra is a little funny like that, she said. It likes to give you the impression that you are in charge. At that, Naruto scowled deeply and began to tilt his head in her direction, but he stopped when the motion spread to the rest of his body and threatened to obscure Jiraiya and the borrowed Byakugan. My guess is that, like Anko said, it likes to remain hidden until it's called. Jiraiya took a breath. It's not doing a good job of that, he said, sensing Naruto's gaze fall on him. As soon as I stepped onto the same floor, I could sense him. I was searching for him, of course, but even at that time, he was too simple to locate. Me, too, Anko added, but at the start of the tests, it was more difficult to notice. He just seemed a little strange, and I assumed that was because of the murderous intent we displayed during the proctoring. Well, maybe inactive is a better word, Jiraiya said, and then, when emotionally triggered, even slightly, it comes up to the surface right away. What was it that was making him so emotionally agitated lately that he was letting go of chakra left and right? His pupil turned a shade pinker than he was already. The Hokage said for the first time, is it possible to fix this? Jiraiya casually cracked his neck and said, oh, yeah, hopefully with training, but if not, we can make something to cover it up. It won't be difficult. I guess this means we'll be working together again, huh? Yamato said, turning back to the blonde who was now shivering and mostly nude. However, what about the job? Naruto scowled. He reassured him, it shouldn't interfere with work. But my Hausa Euro, he had forgotten how money-hungry his student could be, but now he had a better reason. His snooping had shown that the child was helping his girlfriend, who was still a genin, and he had obtained a file on Team Kakashi's trip to Wave to gain a better understanding of the circumstances behind the chakra shift in Naruto. She had little on her side, including grades well below average, a terrible scandal in her personal life, and, if the Chunin exam battle was any indication, little fighting ability. It must be like swimming with a dead weight. You'll just have to train early in the morning and late at night, Anko interrupted his thoughts with a croon, but we're not going to drop you." At the prediction, he could actually see Naruto's eye circles darken. The best damn thing in the world was kissing Hinata, and if Hinata hadn't wanted to help her teammate, Naruto would have been happy to skip the entire last round of the Chunin exams just to continue making out. He had slept in, had coffee, well, he had hot chocolate and sweet buns while reading reports, and a catalog of mission posts, Hinata. It had begun as a lazy day in bed on the one morning he had no training or work due to the event today, and gradually they had gotten closer until the papers were thrown aside and the drinks kept a safe distance away. She had been on top of him at first, as if they had been started out in the infirmary, but this time there were no 2 to 3 inches of scrolls and knives between them, and the difference was obvious. Hinata's shirt was thin, and it was easy to feel her breasts against him through it because breasts naturally follow gravitational pull. Then she took his hand and placed it onto her chest. He thought the sensation of her nipple peeking through the shirt and rubbing into his palm got him hard incredibly fast, and the movements she made with her hips weren't helping, so he flipped them over so as not to ruin his pajamas. Initially, this was a smart move. Hinata followed suit and allowed him to kiss her without scrubbing for a while until she obviously grew weary of simply smooching and removed his shirt. "What are those in hell? They don't hurt, it's okay." When she touched him to feel around the bruises, her sweaty, disagreeable hand said, "Naruto, these look awful." He truly felt bad about letting her undress him. "Can't we just resume our previous activities? You do realize that those are from the training. Why haven't you spoken up earlier? I pushed you down last night. Is this why you didn't like it?" she asked, her eyes widening. "I enjoyed it. They're from training and they don't hurt," he complained, and the brief reassurance seemed to calm her down a little. "I promise." He grinned at her suspicious expression and said, "Will you allow me to show you? It's similar to pressing hard on a hickey after." She continued to flush when he said such things, and it was fantastic. She didn't object when he simply tried to resume his routine, kissing him back and running her hands over his shoulders, though not as enthusiastically as he would have liked, so he moved to her neck and began leaving hickeys. This seemed to cheer her up a little, and she began to mess up his hair once more and to let him know she liked it. He sucked hard on her neck for a minute, then moved up an inch and repeated the action. Her fingertips pressed hard into his ribs at the pain, but he could tell she enjoyed it, and damn, she smelled good. She gave a wonderful shudder under his lips as his chakra snuck out a euro, but this time he gave his permission. The training was worth something. He stuck his tongue out and dug it firmly into the red spot he'd made a few seconds earlier, and she moaned loudly, raising her legs and using them to bring his pelvis closer to hers. "Like that," he whispered, and pulled away, seeing her eyes slide shut and her mouth part as if she was having trouble breathing. This caused him to send out another small wave of the stimulating chakra over her skin. He felt a little daring and kissed her down her neck to her collar, then over the shirt to the top of her breast. Chakra passing to her through the cloth, she squirmed, tightened her thighs again, and he sighed into the crook of her neck, beginning to rock his hips with hers instead of trying to fight the sensations. She had told him it was like a touch while they were all stretched out on the couch one night. "Like a little massage everywhere I feel it," she had explained. "Do you have a condom?" Hinata asked. Letting out a sigh as the air struck his neck, she spoke softly in his ear. In fact, he was unable to speak this morning. That wasn't on the agenda. Hinata snorted and released her grip on him. "Well, judging by the way you literally froze in the middle of humping," she said. "Well, that I didn't know. I don't. Well, that's not possible at this time. Nice. All right, would you like it to take place today? Or shortly?" She scooted closer and asked, her intense gaze and gentle tone canceling each other out. He was still unable to speak. "You look like you're dying, so I'm gonna go out on a limb and say you're not interested in having this conversation right now." He gave a nod. In his mind, there was a tiny scream. "All right, okay." Hinata shimmied backwards awkwardly and pulled her thighs away from him, revealing a wet spot on her underwear that made his mouth dry. "We need to get dressed," she said. She arched an eyebrow and he took her hand before she could move much further away. "I like a euro," he said, his mouth clumsy around the words. "What we're doing now." As her expression softened, she leaned in to give him a cheek kiss and said, "Okay, we can keep doing that." He put an arm around her waist and kissed her, feeling the mood return a little. She kissed him back, wrapping her arms around his neck so he could tilt his head back onto her and enjoy her lips moving over his. She whispered, "You taste really nice, you too." She laughed and gave him another kiss as he slid his hands down from her waist and rested them on her butt, feeling safe to do so. In fact, this wasn't a bad position for making out. He got to squeeze Hinata's ass and her boobs were in his face, just the way he liked them, and his dick wasn't overstimulated. "Seriously, though, we do have to get dressed if we want to make beginning announcements," she said, removing herself and kissing his forehead. He was pretty sure she wouldn't mind him staring, so he put his arms around her and took her wrists to stop her from putting on pants, but before he really knew what he was doing, he'd put his arms around her and taken her wrists after she pulled off her shirt and began putting on real clothes. He was left staring at her back, staring at the symmetrical dips of her hip bones just over the band of her underwear, which vanished when the shirt she was wearing dropped down to cover them. "Well?" She put her mouth to his cheek. "Can we stay here a little longer?" he asked, nuzzling her hair and taking a deep breath. Her sigh did not make him want to get out of bed any more than before, so he moved his hands up her arms to her shoulders to give her a pseudo-massage while she hesitated. "Oh, no, when Sasuke fights, I can't miss it." She smiled up at him and said, "We can cuddle after." He was on the verge of physically barring the door so he could spend the day €1, or even the week €1. Huddled up with her, they had enough food to last them. She moved away from him and went back to dressing, and he had a strange sensation in his chest that she had taken something of his away with her. He began putting on his own clothes, looking at her every now and then while she dressed and applied some makeup for the occasion, and he wondered, would she have chosen to be with him over Sasuke's fight if he had accepted her? Sakura wasn't too upset about her failure in the Chunin exam's weeding out round because, as it turned out, Sasuke trained only with her and Kakashi. Interestingly, Hinata didn't return to her team's regular training after the exam. Instead, their routine changed so that Hinata was present for their spars in the morning, but she was now spending most of the day apart from them. When she asked Kakashi about it, he replied that Hinata was just taking on more missions. She was also energized because, although her stamina was still lacking and her physical strength was still poor, she was able to manage her chakras almost as well as Kakashi. As he had stated himself, Sasuke's training with Kakashi had resulted in numerous injuries, including electrocutions and scrapes, and she had managed to handle them all with the aid of a few books. She felt a little proud of herself. Even though it was a body part that was not even covered in clothing, Sasuke had to give his permission for this because it was still treatment for his body, and that felt nice because it meant he could actually spend a few minutes with her even when he didn't have to. The only thing she had trouble with was a fracture in his humerus that he had gotten near the epicondyles, but they had gone to the hospital about that and she got to watch as it was fixed. He had stated cautiously that he had agreed because it was important for her to know how to heal bones, but still. The first few fights had been rather dull, until Shikamaru's, which was unexpected, and she was yelling at him the entire time that he needed to make a good impression for their team, which was funny because she didn't seem to be following her own advice. She sat down more comfortably, drinking a little more of the tea she'd gotten from the vendors. It was a lovely day. Gaara of the Sand against the last Uchiha. That kid was creepy, and she hated the uneasy feeling that came from being around him, which was like being around Chunin Uzumaki when he was angry. His little red head was searching the crowd for someone, and she had a hunch that the person he was searching for was a tall, blonde, whiskered woman. It was unsettling, but fortunately she did not have to deal with either of them much. After the incident, Hinata had been punched out by her cousin and began vomiting blood. Uzumaki had practically teleported to her side and began letting out the hell chakra. And the 12-year-old weirdo had stared and acted more strangely. She had only noticed this connection during the brief pre-exam. "Hello." She jumped in some way. Chunin Uzumaki appeared even more worn out than normal. "Hi, have they not yet started fighting?" Hinata, who was actually dressed normally and without too much skin, said, "I thought we came just in time for it," and sat down beside her. "You arrived late." Actually, she clarified that Sasuke's tardiness caused them to postpone their fight, which was originally scheduled for the previous round. "That implies that he is not eligible, doesn't it?" After explaining, "Well, Sasuke's the main attraction here, so it makes sense that they'd make an exception," Uzumaki wrapped Hinata in his arm. Typical for Sasuke. She planted a kiss on his cheek before leaning in close to him, her gaze sweeping over everyone who had gathered to observe. Uzumaki was also looking into the arena, but his eyes were fixed on Suna's champion, and Gaara was staring back at him. The intensity was cold and harsh, at least on Uzumaki's end, and Sakura felt uncomfortable just watching it. She looked around for Sasuke, who was also staring at Uzumaki and his opponent. As soon as the fight began, the Suna child raised a shield of sand. "He's gonna struggle to get through that," Uzumaki stated, "but Kakashi should have something up his sleeve to get around it." "He does," Sakura declared with pride, "but isn't that a drawback? How will he see to launch an attack from there? That sandy eyeball floating above them is most likely looking over here." "Oh, how disgusting." Hinata wrinkled her nose at the sandy eyeball that was, in fact, staring in their direction. "I feel violated." Uzumaki observed the orb wryly, but remarked, "You can see through walls, but a sandy eyeball is too much. As long as it's me looking through the walls. That's not fair. Hey, I mean, if you want to see me naked." The barrier was broken by Sasuke. Sakura spoke hastily. At least Uzumaki had a sheepish expression. Is it possible to see through the sand? He questioned Hinata. He's fucking with Sasuke's hand. Gross. Sakura shifted another seat away from them as Hinata snorted. Uzumaki looked at her and said, I'm sorry, we'll stop. She nodded, thinking, I doubt it, but she didn't want his eerie cat eyes on her. Oh my. She suddenly felt exhausted. She blinked as tiny white feathers drifted into her field of vision. Did someone bring a pillow to rest on and then tear it? How strange, the feathers' thin edges fluttered in the wind like eyelashes, and she felt a great sense of relief as she closed them. She was exhausted. How did this happen? Uzumaki's chakra struck her hard, like a blow to the breast, and she opened her eyes, her fight or flight response in full force. The blues tinted a choleric red that looked nothing like the Inuzuka bloodline, and Hinata's uncanny gaze turned to her as he stared at Naruto in a daze, looking at him with a strange, panicked, and vaguely adoring look. That implied her assumption that it couldn't be true was incorrect, but this was. Was Uzumaki a person at all? Naruto? Hinata whispered, placing a hand on his chest for support, and he instantly accepted it as if it were a lifeline. Sharp, long, unmistakably non-human teeth protruded from behind his lips as he snarled. We're being invaded. Combat was scary, and invasions were frightening. He had hardly ever faced other ninja, and although he was still stronger than Hinata and her group, it was only due to Bastard Sensei's harsh training, not any field experience. What ought I to do? With large eyes and a steady appearance, Hinata turned to face him. She was afraid but not panicking. She was only seeking orders, and he was a higher rank than she was. He was wearing a shirt that looked vaguely nice, some knives and wire out of habit, and the most comfortable pants he could find that weren't threadbare because he was expecting to sit for an hour and then go home to cuddle with his girlfriend again. He would be clinging to those like they were salvation for the remainder of the fight, unless he could steal some from someone else. Take someone's weapons and pick them off easily, then either help the civilians escape or reinforce the senior shinobi, he said, scanning the crowd for someone he could easily defeat from across the arena. He saw a gray, blank pair of eyes that were rimmed by dark circles, like a raccoon's, and Sasuke was not there. Gaara of the Sand was determined to make contact, and this would be their last chance together, and weapons were useless against sand armor, so a sensation akin to an itching sensation began to rise at the back of his neck. Naruto, Hinata said, obstructing his view of the child and kissing him firmly. Be careful when it's done. We'll meet at the apartment. It wasn't going to be a fair fight, but nothing about these past few months was particularly fair, so he wasn't being picky about the age of the person Hinata was going to attack. She leapt over the railing in front of their seats and ran across the field at a group of 12-year-olds in the stands who had just begun sparring with Konoha Academy students. An exploding tag caught the legs of the bleachers. The kids, and now Hinata, were on, and the entire group teetered towards the enormous hole created by the bomb, with one child falling over the edge like an egg rolling off a counter. Actually, it was kind of funny. The ninja had a sound headband, and Naruto moaned inwardly at the resulting addition to the force Konoha was fending off. There was a blur of black, and Naruto barely avoided being punched in the nose with a pair of brass knuckles. A euro. Well, they might have just been steel. A euro. But the important thing was that they were hard and pointy. This might have been a small kids band together to take down one big kid situation, but if it was, Kumo, Iwa, and Kiri were also involved. Konoha was insanely powerful in comparison to the other nations, and they were snatching up customers like milk through a straw. A part of Naruto was furious that his third best shirt was likely to get blood on it today, and he continued to jump back along the bleachers, trying to avoid the punches in his unsuitable attire. The sound nin, looking increasingly irritated, began shouting obscenities at him and pulled out a fistful of shuriken, throwing them without aiming. He avoided hand to hand, which had moved them far from the railing and back to where two Konoha nin were taking on three from Suna, which was a fight with many more sharp objects, which he wanted to avoid. Two of them missed completely, one he dodged, and two more made even slices over his side and forearm. The wetness on his ribs told him that his shirt was definitely ruined, but the pain was mostly just a stinging and uncomfortable stretching sensation as he continued to dodge, so he just ignored it as best he could. Do you think your aim would improve if you stopped talking for a moment? The man narrowed his eyes when Naruto yelled at him. The spray hit him and everything around him, but he'd closed his eyes at the right moment, so he wasn't blinded for longer than was acceptable. Like you Konoha trash would know. He used the opening to vault the two rows of seats between them and landed with both feet on the opponent's chest, knocking him backwards and making a nice, loud knocking sound. When the guy's head hit the concrete, he quickly drew a kunai and sliced the throat, stabbing the man's hand into the dusty row floor when it came up to try to push him away. The sound nin's belt was simple and unrestricted by belt loops. He quickly removed it from the gurgling man and wrapped it around his own waist. He licked one hand clean as he squatted between the seats and surveyed his possessions, noting that he had more than 10 shuriken, 8 more kunai, 1.5 loops of wire, 2 tablets that were likely soldier pills, and a small canister of alcohol. He opened it and took a gentle sniff. Feeling much safer, he leapt away from the body and headed toward the ongoing battle between the Konoha and Suna shinobi, where the 2 Konoha shinobi were being backed into a corner but appeared to be unharmed. If he could even the odds, they would likely be okay. He passed some wire through a kunai's loop, sent a chakra enforced toss around one of the Suna nin's neck, then yanked hard to pull her down to him. The fight paused for a moment as the group watched the surprisingly light shinobi sail over the rows of seats and land hard on her back across 2 rows of seats. He gave her the same treatment he'd given the sound nin, slice across the throat, before she could move, which he doubted she would ever do again because he'd just cut off her air and pulled her by the neck so hard she should have been decapitated. He then began unwinding the bloody wire so he could use it again. She gasped for air after her throat was freed, but it quickly turned into a gurgle, and she thrashed on the seats for a short while before he caught her by the head and twisted violently to end her suffering. He raised an eyebrow back, wondering why the group had not unfrozen from their positions and were all staring at him, the arms of the Suna duo drooping loosely at their sides. He noticed that his front was also soaked, and as he looked down at himself, he realized that he appeared to have just gone swimming in vital fluids. His eye began to sting. Blood was getting in it. He raised a hand to wipe his brow and noticed that it was as though he was wearing an elbow-length red glove. When one of the Suna nin decided he was the greater threat, he yelled a war cry and charged at him. Naruto was ready to defend himself, but the would-be assailant was stopped in his tracks by a wave of sand. The redhead's eyes were fixed on Naruto's front, and his mouth hung loosely at the sight of so much gore. Naruto turned to face the child who had likely been glaring at him the entire time. The sandy arm-like object threw the child's countryman aside and reached out to him. Naruto dragged his ass. He had to leave the arena, but he wasn't exactly sure where he was going, so he ran up the steps 2 at a time until he reached the wall covered in leaf insignia, and then he started racing up and over the side without looking back to see if the child was in pursuit. He could feel the bloodthirsty chakra following him, and his own was leaping up to wrap around him, keep it from touching his flesh, and he didn't stop it. His heart felt like it was pumping acid as he ran down the wall, which was fortunately the side of the arena closest to one of the public parks. He tried to stay on the main streets, which were deserted and the shops were either boarded up against the invaders or in the process of locking down, so he didn't run into any civilians until he could reach the park to prevent damage to the buildings. "Why do you refuse to look at me?" the child screamed, and the sound of his voice nearly made him sulk. The trees were visible to Naruto. Good, good. His face struck the pavement. He was lifted off the ground by the sand that was wrapped around his ankle and brought to face the boy, who appeared more resentful and tearful than someone who was about to commit murder. A whisper came from the boy, "We're Alakea Euro." "Then let me go," Naruto said as calmly as he could. The children's chakra was touching him all over, and unlike Hinata's comparison, it felt more like an unpleasant prodding. He had an instinct telling him not to just take it lying down, but to release excess energy to get it off him. This was a bad idea because, for whatever reason, Gaara of the Sand wasn't suffocating him with his namesake. Perhaps he could lull him into a false sense of security before attacking for a clean finish. He straightened up and looked closely at the boy, who seemed unsure of what he wanted from him now, but surprisingly, the child obeyed and placed him almost gently on the ground. "What's causing Suna to attack us? I don't know." Despite his reluctance to accept that response, the interrogator in him persisted, asking, "What's your role in all of this?" "I kill. We all kill," Naruto said with a roar of laughter. "We are ninjas. Why are you using your power?" However, he didn't really rely on this child to follow social cues, and he didn't want to put himself in a more vulnerable position. Perhaps he was just deluding himself by thinking he could still flee if necessary, but he'd rather try to give himself the option he could sit, and the child might take the cue and copy him, giving him maybe a half-second advantage when he decided to make a move. "I don't know. If this was the way it was going to go, there was absolutely no point in this conversation." Naruto suppressed his annoyance and tried again. "Did you have something you wanted to talk about with me? Are you a demon?" "Yes, so we are alike." "Are you a demonic being?" "Yes." "Stop. You don't act like a demon?" "Is that correct? Some of them do not fear you?" "Lucky me. How about you murder them?" Blinking, Naruto said, "They're my friends. They hate us. Some of them don't. They are untrustworthy." Naruto flushed because, well, he wasn't particularly proud of making kids cry, and the child shivered, looking for a moment as if he might cry. "Well, I guess I did take that chance in a way. It paid off." "Then it's just me." That was the only warning he received before a shit ton of chakra exploded out of the child, and so much sand that the sun was blocked out began blowing everywhere, triggering his own demonic chakra, which was likely the only reason Gaara's skin wasn't desiccated. His own chakra flowed like a drain had been opened in a full tub, and the idea of fighting it was instantly dismissed with a very emphatic, "Yeah, right." The pull continued, bringing with it a sense of bloodlust that he could withstand just as well as the power. Anko, Yamato, and the others encouraged him to ignore and push it back, but Naruto, this wasn't the time for that, and he was relieved the smell of his shirt, still wet with lifeblood, was provoking the exact kind of thing. As the sand cleared, Naruto found himself facing a figure roughly 6 times his size, with a face mask that made him associate the figure more with a raccoon than a cat. His own chakra was building up, preparing to take whatever was coming, and when the thing delivered the first blow, Naruto allowed his chakra to catch the sand and disintegrate it. The thing appeared to tense in disbelief, and fear tainted the hurt and anger that was emanating from the form, and Naruto felt himself smile. Was he afraid of a giant fucking sand monster that scared the entire village so much that they didn't want to wipe their asses without its consent? Excellent as it fucking ought to be, it was his turn to attack, and Naruto's excitement made it a little more ostentatious than it needed to be. It was his turn to show off, after all. His energy roared out, smoked everything in his path, and then raced up to the sky, spreading a familiar and delightful darkness. The thing was unable to avoid it, and while it was still dazed, Naruto ran towards it, punching through the sand to grab the boy's spindly arm, which was essentially what would have happened to him had he not met Hinata. He worked the child, kicking and screaming, out of his protective cocoon little by little as the sand jumped at him, trying to scrape his hand off the child, but his own chakra reacted, hot and volatile enough to turn the stuff to glass. Naruto hesitated, which proved to be a mistake, as his hand tightened around the Gaara's thin neck and the boy shrieked like a child would. Naruto grabbed 2 handfuls of Gaara's shirt and pulled him back after he headbutted him and jerked himself backwards. He then secured his arms around the boys and fell backward onto the ground, rolling them over so he could use his weight to keep the child down. While he was trying to figure out what was going on, the chakra almost solidified, and something almost lifted him off the boy before Naruto increased the weight of his power, and whatever it was vanished back inside Gaara. The child's chakra was no longer even attempting to attack him. Instead, it was just swirling around. Panicked Gaara thrashed, back arching, clearly in agony, but it wasn't Naruto's energy doing this to him. Both demons and demon containers were present. Furthermore, it seems that nobody fucking knew how to make one of those without breaking something. Crushing the air out of Gaara now would definitely solve the problema. The boy and the demon would both die, and they would not be in any worse shape than before. And it would be easier and kinder to kill him, if whatever was inside him was trying to escape. The boy cried out once more. Naruto paused. They were similar. What would Naruto have become if he hadn't had someone like Hinata, or Ino, or Jiraiya? He even had a slight affection for Yamato. Where would he have gone from that time when he had no friends and was hunting and eating animals in secret? He recalled the moments just minutes before when the 4, Konoha and Sunanin alike, were staring at him covered in blood, their faces carefully concealing their disgust. One day, sentimentality was going to kill him. He tried to recall how he had connected with Hinata as he fixed his intense gaze on the pale skin of Gaara's neck. Touch mouth to mouth, consume blood or flesh. He grabbed a fistful of the red hair and leaned back to pull the poor kid off the ground, wincing at the amount of tears and snot all over the poor kid's face, then touched his mouth to Gaara as he leaned down and bit the skin. Gaara screamed again, teeth slicing through easily, the taste confirming what he'd thought. This was a human exposed to a lot of demonic energy, but the basic taste was the same: salt, sweetness, warmth. Despite the fact that Chunin Uzumaki was terrifying, Sakura was relieved to receive orders because she wasn't sure what to do with herself. Her first battle had resulted in a large cut just above her ear, but she was able to repair it with her stinging jutsu, which also gave her a black eye and more knives, as well as the prize of 4 shuriken and a pack of cigarettes that actually contained sticks of bubblegum. In defense of herself, she engaged a nin her age, but almost instantly Kakashi swooped in, beat him out of the way, winked at her, and took off again, presumably a clue to stick to small fry. It should be noted that she was once again fighting 12-year-olds. A large hole had appeared in the stands where she was, and Sakura assumed someone had gone over because the group of children Hinata was protecting were huddled around the edge. She then turned to see where Hinata had gone and saw her nearly on the opposite side of the arena, surrounded by 12-year-olds just like her. The child who had fallen was sitting there trying to pull his finger out from under a chunk of cement, and she was proud to say that, even though she wasn't the strongest member of her team, she was able to move that chunk, but the child's finger probably wouldn't be useful anymore when she arrived. Their whiny little faces flocked around her, showing her bruises, scratches, and other minor hurts. What? This was such an embarrassment. Where in the world was Sasuke? He ought to have to endure this as well. She detested kids. I think I got cut bad on my back, too. She turned to look at it. You're correct, your shirt will be lifted by me, the blood will be sticky, so it will hurt, accept it. There was too much blood. She had no way of knowing what else had gotten into the opening, so it would be a bad idea to seal it with her jutsu. The cut was large and deep, probably from some metal support that had been split in the explosion and wound up in the unfortunate child's back. He was supposed to know this already because she had taken her first aid course at the age of 12, which covered all of this. We're going to take your shirt off and you're gonna hold it there so it soaks up the blood. His arm was too short to support it, but he tried. Okay, then we're gonna go up there and one of your friends will do it. Okay. It felt strange, and a little pleasant, when the other children helped to wrap him up when they got up there and then turned to her for instructions. The other girl is where? The white-eyed ones? Hinata said, over here, and landed close to her. I scared them a little by dislocating some wrists. I doubt that they will return here. It's okay. What is the closest? The sky was dark. The time of day was midday. That version of Uzumaki that radiated malice and made her skin crawl just by being near her, never did anything to Hinata. He'd taken her body with him into the far room, and Sakura hadn't heard anything to suggest that they were doing anything but napping. Hinata was also blinking up at the sky, but she didn't look nearly as panicked as Sakura did, and why would she? Hey, how are you? Sakura's eyes suddenly shifted to Hinata. Are you aware of what this is? It's Naruto. I believe it's beyond me to explain, but... Sakura nodded. Remember how the sky changed in wave? That was him? Hinata asked, her eyes widening. Probably it must be because he was present when it occurred and is now here. Hinata whispered, he can change the sky a euro, as she gazed at the darkness encroaching on them. Hinata Uzumaki. At this point, everything was so chaotic that she wasn't really in the mood to examine anyone's helmet, but Sakura turned away from there to see a Hinata raising an eyebrow at a man she assumed was a Junin of Konohagakure. In any case, the man had a helmet with the leaf insignia on it, which perhaps she shouldn't be depending on to tell her who to trust and who to avoid. Who are you? Nadeshiko Yamato, Naruto's instructor. She straightened up and blinked. Oh, hello, did Naruto ask you to support me? No. A nearby explosion briefly diverted both, and the children screamed and huddled closer to one another. Can you help me herd them out of the arena? Sakura said as she got to her feet. Well, it's good to meet you, huh? After they had done so, Hinata addressed the man who served as Chunin Uzumaki's mentor. Likewise. Did you have anything more you wanted to say? With a furrowed brow at the man's conflicted expression, Hinata asked. It's a euro. If it's a secret from Naruto, I promise I won't tell, Hinata said, letting out a clumsy laugh that faded. He let out a deep sigh and stared into Hinata's eyes, saying, Naruto really wants to keep you away from his problems, but this is not the time or place for it, but I doubt I'll be in contact with you ever again. The look on Hinata's face wavered. Oh. And for that, I hold my student in the highest regard. However, the reality is that he is carrying a heavy load. With a frown, Hinata said, yes, I know, I am wondering if you truly know how much of this weight comes from his relationship with you. Hinata appeared more subdued than Sakura had ever seen her in that situation. I want to encourage you to do your share with him, but it's not my place. He takes on more responsibility than he ought to for you. He went out. Sakura looked at Hinata awkwardly while the children were out. Well, shall we leave again? While we search for Sasu, we can cover one another. Hinata suddenly started crying and stammered, I'm fine. It's nothing, right away, and putting her hands over her face. After hesitating, Sakura wrapped her arms around the other girl, damning the consequences. After giving her a brief hug in return, Hinata froze and withdrew, saying, I said I'm fine. You're not okay, and if a few remarks from a stranger cause you to react in this way, there is a serious issue that needs to be discussed. It's none of your business. Ignore that. Hinata stared at her, and Sakura felt a blush rise up at her reaction. It wasn't like she'd never cursed in front of her before, right? What was the big deal? My teammate is you. If it's important to you, it's important to me as well. Don't assume that I don't care, then. Wiping the last of the tears from her eyes, Hinata chuckled and said, wow, that is heartwarming. Oh, please stop talking. We've been training to kick ass together, so let's find Sasuke first. Like Sasuke'll let us steal his spotlight, snorted Uzumaki to ensure that no one believes he received assistance during the battle. He is most likely as far away from us as he can be at this time. He can accept it, then he is causing concern among his teammates. Sakura felt much better about being unprepared for an invasion after Hinata laughed once more and gave her a real hug this time. Black quiet the world vanished, and he found himself standing in front of a huge cage with a large, frightening object behind the bars for some reason. He didn't dare to look at him. He cleared his throat. Naruto, the creature that resembled a raccoon, opened one eye and said, "Kyuubi. I'm afraid I, don't really know who you are." With a closed eye, Ichibi, more quiet. "Kyuubi, what are you doing here? I don't suppose you could a Euro." "No," with a frown, Naruto said. "Why not? I'm confined, why should I give a damn about what occurs outside?" Naruto's gaze swept across the cage until he noticed the seal pressed against the prison's bars, several heads above him. "How do you have so much control over him? On the outside, you appeared to be building yourself a body?" "Shoddy sealers botched the job, how else?" the Ichibi sneered. "However, shouldn't you be deaf?" "Yes, there were the teeth, 1,000 of them. Why don't you just unseal me if you're concerned about my livelihood?" "If I do, what will happen to Gaara?" The smile subsided to a typical one. "Nothing, he will be all right." Naruto declared that he could taste the lie in the air. "You can't stay here forever," the raccoon dog said in a tone that was almost logical. "You and my jailer are currently trapped inside your chakra mine, serves as a protective barrier against your negative effects, but it won't last forever, and my jailer will pass away at that point. Meanwhile, your village is being attacked by a more powerful foe than that toy of yours can contend with." "Oh, screw you too." The raccoon dog was much more knowledgeable about demons than Naruto, and Hinata's condition was still unknown, so it was unclear what would kill her permanently and what wouldn't. Perhaps the One-Tails was telling the truth, and the choice was clear: risking Hinata's and Konoha's safety by taking more time to deal with this when there might not be an end until he and the Ichibi duked it out, and Naruto still couldn't control his chakra enough to even surface it under duress. What was to say, however, that once the One-Tails were free of its jailer, it wouldn't destroy everything it could. Hinata can take a hell of a lot more than whatever they can dish out. "Oh, what gives you the right to say that? She is not immortal just because she has the ability to resurrect herself whenever her body expires." He was aware that this was not infallible. Naruto shrugged and said, "Yes, it makes no difference which of us is inside the seal and which is outside of it, so say whatever you want." The raccoon frowned and said, "You're a fool if you rely on the contract to ensure her life. So are you if you think I'll let you out of here now that you've made it pretty clear that you know how she can be killed." "You want my word that I won't damage your toy?" the creature said, "sitting up or your community? You've got it, Kyuubi. My only goal is to exact revenge on those who imprisoned me." "Your word isn't very important. You're a demon and you really look like an animal that is notorious for being cunning. And you are running out of time." Naruto started to perspire. With a sigh of disgust, the Ichibi lay down once more. "Very well, we will wait until your toy has been bound, killed, and rendered unrecoverable due to the sin of committing a demon. Then, using your limited knowledge, you will try to exact revenge and either die or be beaten back. If you release me, I may be able to do it for you, or I may perish inside my host due to the effects of your oversaturated chakra on his body. I don't know how to do that or how to recognize when he's manipulating it to gain control over me, but we can make a contract?" "Fuck, won't you harm Hinata? Or anybody else in the community?" "Freedom before death, Kyuubi," the raccoon said, rolling its eyes. "To torture and kill the people who put me in jail would be a great bonus, but I would have to find out who exactly did it first. Your village is of no interest to me." Naruto made stern eye contact with the demon as he walked to the cage, gripping the bars and pulling himself up, having to hold tight with his legs, as if it were an academy rope exercise. The seal was higher than he had anticipated, and he was panting and sweating when he arrived. It was also larger, spread out over a piece of cloth that could have been the entire front of his shirt, and the characters were different from the ones on his stomach. They were blotchy and scrawly, and they appeared to move when he wasn't looking at them directly. "You owe me," he said, glancing down at the raccoon that was observing him. Of course, it smiled and stuck out its tongue as if it were tasting freedom. He felt sheepish for expecting the seal to zap him when he touched it, or vanish out of reach, or anything like that, but as soon as it stopped touching the doors, the One-Tails began to laugh, spittle sprays leaping from its maw, and the room they were in appeared to thin. With the cloth seal still in his hand, Naruto opened his eyes to a night sky. He could hear no sirens or fighting noises, only the rustle of leaves, and the park was encircled by a number of pleasant, modest apartments, most of them with lights on, that were not particularly fancy but still beyond his means. He crawled to Gaara, who lay a few feet away, and felt for a pulse, but found none. Therefore, there had been no use in letting the Ichibi go at all, and Gaara had still died after it had gotten loose. It wasn't until Naruto entered the room carrying a body over his shoulder that Ibiki realized what was causing his anxiety. "Are you okay?" After they sent the cadaver to the refrigerators, he inquired. "Yeah. Wind got knocked out of me." It had sounded like a whisper, so it was probably untrue. "We were all knocked out today. Nobody anticipated it. Who was that?" "The son of the K's Cage, a former Ichibi container. I thought forensics could look into him, but he's dead now." Gaara of the Sand. His siblings were already under arrest, but it wouldn't hurt to look again and see if there was something odd concealed in the anatomy. Naruto held up a roll of freshly dirt-stained cloth and said, "This was what the demon was sealed in him with." Even though Ibiki would have preferred to take the dead boy over the seal, he did so because Naruto appeared to be in a lifeless state. "Tonight, you are not required to submit a report to make sure we don't miss anything. We'll need to work with Ino to get all the information from you later. You will hear from the Toad Sage regarding that. So I can leave? Before you do, I have some bad news." With a feeble smile, Naruto said, "Worse than an invasion?" The blonde's smile disappeared like butter on a hot pan as he said, "Worse than that." "Has someone been harmed? The Hokage is dead?" Now that the wind had been knocked out of him, Ibiki briefly feared that the boy would faint, but he managed to pull through and stopped swaying. How? He had a whole guard, and they were. Orochimaru succeeded. He is a former pupil of the Hokage and a member of the Sannin. We've got witnesses. Suna was aware that the goal was probably to either seize control of Konoha or significantly impair it. Naruto shifted his weight from foot to foot, feeling very uncertain. The third had been in the office for so long and had been so quiet lately that most people had just accepted his presence. The Uzumaki, both honorary and natural, had been an investment of his, and Ibiki imagined that it had paid off fairly well. The Kyuubi container had settled here, established roots, and developed an attachment that he was unlikely to compromise on, so everything had gone well for the Hokage in this regard. He had his weapon in his town, he was in love with a villager, and he was now even grieving his loss. He pondered whether the Sandaime had considered Naruto after his own death. Naruto was a brilliant man, and it's likely that he had. The child began to sway once more. "Ino said to tell you Hinata's safe and waiting for you at home." That was it. Naruto walked away without saying sorry and about-faced. Ibiki went back to the K's Cage's children's files, wondering how well they had gotten along with their brother, and whether the body might be used as leverage. Have you heard?" "Yeah. I'm so sorry, Naruto." Lit by their shoddy kitchen fluorescence, she looked stunning, her eyes large and filled with empathy, her hair glistening softly, her lips plump a euro. Likely from worrying tame a euro, and the dust on her face adding nothing to the beauty. He stepped toward her, and she hurried to meet him, reading his face, putting her arms around him securely so he could lean on them, and burying his face in her hair, he breathed in, catching her sweat, her anxiety, and the smell of a lot of blood. A euro. None of it hers. She whispered in his ear, "I've got you, we're safe, I've got you," as her hands rubbed his back, and he vaguely realized he was crying. She withdrew an inch or so to put her lips to his forehead, wipe away the tears, and then give him another tender, soft, and sweet hug. He hugged her middle, face in her shirt, breathing in, letting her hands, scent, and voice hold him for the moment, while she walked back until they hit the couch, then pulled him down with her, kissing his hair, rubbing his shoulders and back, and whispering condolences. When the lump in his throat was no longer there, he whispered, "God, Hinata Euro. How could this have happened?" He had a guard, he's the strongest. That prickling sensation in his nose returned, and he turned his face back into her chest, looking sheepish when he realized he had been snotting all over her in addition to crying. He was a big target, she said, kissing his hairline. As a pupil of his, Orochimaru was familiar with Sarutobi-sama's fighting style. "He is no longer there. I simply can't." Hinata gave him a closer hug and said, "I know." He was aware that Hinata had lost her mother when she was very young, and she had discussed it with him on significant occasions, such as her mother's birthday and the anniversary of her passing as a child. He had the most difficult time understanding what it was like to love someone and then have them vanish. Was it worse than having no one at all, or was it better to have even the memory of someone who loved you? He tried to concentrate on the sensation of her here, and he could smell her, Hinata, beneath all the stress of the battlefield. He could see her, well, all he could see now was a bit of her hair and the mound of a breast under her shirt. He could hear her solicitous murmurs, he could feel her caresses, and he could see Hinata lying dead on the bridge. His control was shot after the events of the day. His chakra jumped. Hinata began beneath him at the sharp jab of panic that picture inspired, then resumed her caressing his hair and soothing hums, pressing more kisses to the top of his head. He sat up to allow Hinata to escape, but it felt like he was being gently jostled as she attempted to slide out from under him behind her. The window revealed their usual block with the sky still dark as pitch. He had expected the city to look different, perhaps more desolate, but it looked exactly like it did every other day at 6 a.m., with laundry still hanging between the buildings on their block and flowers still in the pots on people's windowsills. As soon as he stepped back, Hinata whispered, "You should take a shower," placing a cool hand on his cheek and saying, "You're covered in blood." His face, arms, stomach, and chest were all itchy, and he could feel it building up under his fingernails. He had probably ruined the couch, but he didn't care. He had noticed it as soon as he woke up. "Come on." Hinata took his hand. "You go first." "No." He stood with her and allowed her to guide him into the restroom because her tone was firm but not rude. He continued to stare at the floor, taking in the yellowed tiles and patchy paint job, while Hinata hurried about filling the tub with water and shutting the door to keep the hot air from escaping. The light inside was too harsh. When he took her hand, she had already begun working on his belt and removed his shirt. "I can do the rest. It'll take you hours if I let you do it on your own, correct? I won't look. I just want to get you clean and into bed." He sighed. "I believe you. I just €1." When the water was ready, Hinata took off his pants without waiting for permission, and he didn't stop her again. He slipped off his boxers and got in, and the water, which had already turned green from something herbal she had dropped in, turned brown very quickly. He was grateful that Hinata lathered a sponge and removed the blood from his back, scrubbing hard enough to remove new skin. He heard the shower turn on to remove the mess trails on the tub's sides, or for Hinata's personal washing, but she didn't let him soak in the blood and dirt soup. Instead, she pushed him toward the bed with a towel around his waist. In 10 minutes. In a similar amount of time, Hinata was entering the room with her hair plastered to her back and a lavender scent, and he noticed that it had been implied that he was supposed to change into his nightwear when he had entered. Instead, he had simply sat on the bed in the towel. Despite this, Hinata seemed unconcerned and, similar to the bathroom, assisted him in getting into bed like a child. As soon as she got into the bed, he curled up with her, pressing his face into her damp hair, feeling her warm, soft body curve into his. Her breathing settled into the size he was used to, and gradually he fell asleep after watching her put on her pajamas and go out to turn off the lights around the apartment before returning and drawing their curtains. Minute by minute, the numbers on the clock on her bedside table ticked away. Only when Hinata stirred to turn onto her back had Naruto left his position curled around her. He put his head on her chest and pressed against her once more after she had finished the motion, listening for her heartbeat. Quiet, slow, alive. Her arms encircled him once more in her sleep. Blocking his view of the clock, he shut his eyes. He lay there until she eventually took off her arms and attempted to turn over once more. At that point, he realized it was 6 in the morning and that it was time to get out of bed. He mopped the floor, cleaned the stove and microwave, and wiped down the kitchen counters for their laundry. He dispatched a clone. He began using bleach to remove the stains from their couch and rug. He disposed of the expired items in their refrigerator. He sprayed rubbing alcohol on the mold after scraping it off their bathroom ceiling. He gave their plants some water. He nearly started vacuuming, but decided against it after realizing the time. Even though this was the 3rd time he had done so, Hinata woke up when he and a clone began pushing the oven away from the wall to see if they could figure out why it wasn't working properly. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little." "Are you lying?" "Yes." "Did you eat?" He hadn't. "I drank some juice." "That's not eating. I'll make you something." "That's okay." "It's not. I'll make you something." After several minutes, she dragged him to the table and away from their malfunctioning device, where they shared chicken sandwiches. His was loaded with mayonnaise. His clone entered the living room carrying 2 loads of clean clothes and began folding them. Hinata let out a sigh. "You're not gonna try to sleep at all, are you?" "I did try. This is better. I'm getting things done. I'll go to work soon. How about you?" "Sasuke's in the hospital. I'll go see him." It surprised Naruto that he was worried. He felt numb ever since he received the news and had assumed Hinata was the only exception, not because he didn't like Sasuke. "What happened?" "I dunno. I'll ask." The clones' tinkering filled the silence as they observed one another for some time. Hinata eventually carried their plates into the kitchen and filled the kettle before beginning to wash them. He trailed behind and observed her work, gradually approaching her until she placed all of their dishes on the drying rack and he was able to give her a hug without interfering. She still smelled like her shampoo, but now she also smelled like their clothes and sheets. Scratching his hair calmingly, she turned in his arms and planted tiny kisses on his face and neck. "Let's go back to bed." Ironically, he would have been pawing under her shirt before she could change her mind if she had said that to him less than 24 hours earlier. It was incredibly stupid. "No, I'm gonna go in to work. They'll have caught some people to try and work some stuff out through," and he became quiet. He hadn't given the possibility any thought, but Hinata cupped his cheek and traced the shell of his ear with a finger before asking, "What is it? Are we at war? With sand or Soundor?" He had only been grateful when the fighting stopped last night because everything was so chaotic. However, they had been overrun. Suna and Otto had ignored the territories that had been agreed upon and the treaties that had been signed and stamped, and Naruto could not fathom that any Konoha leader, not even Sarutobi, would want this to go unpunished. "I don't know, but I don't think so if we wear a euro." Gazing around their kitchen, Naruto thought, there wouldn't be any difference. We could be at war right now and we wouldn't even know it. Their living room was still arranged the same way it had been for the past 2 years, with a small TV in the corner and a row of lovely cacti and flowers on the windowsill. Their shabby little kitchen was equally shabby and small, and their oven was still not heating properly. Nothing had changed in relation to the war, the Hokage's demise, Hinata's death on the bridge, or his transformation into the Kyuubi. It wasn't just improper, it was worse. His pants were now rubbing against the cabinet behind her as Hinata drew him closer to her. He was annoyed that despite the situation, the contact was still exciting him as her chest pressed against his. "You don't know that we are, but if we area euro, and that's a big if a euro, then we won't die. You're not, I'm not," she said, cutting through the clone's fumbling and the steamer's timid whistles. "There's no guarantee, Hina. Right now, I'm making that decision," she spat, clenching her fists in his shirt as if they were fighting. "Well, love, that sounds fantastic, but I'm not sure your assurances are reliable here because you've already passed away twice." Despite her determination, it was insufficient. He could still clearly recall how he felt when they were moving in his and her belongings after working so hard to get them an apartment when he was 13 and discovering it had mold and mice and God knows what else. The fact that he had something so valuable and could take care of it, and that he was making the first moves a euro, getting an apartment, earning enough money to eat, working, and eventually having enough to buy some nicer things, like a television set or some paints for Hinata, who liked that kind of stuff. A euro was an incredible, bubbly feeling. And above it all was another kind of fear when he ran out of money. He had gone days without eating before, but to make Hinata endure that? Did his friend move in with him after leaving her family? He detested hunger. He detested the way it made him feel lightheaded, the way that drinking water on an empty stomach made him feel as though it was running through his body, and the fact that eating in the morning rather than at night would cause him to feel hungry again an hour later because he needed the energy for work and not sleep. Hinata was incredibly gentle, lovely, and compassionate. The idea of her going through 2 days of that with him made him more angry than he could even describe now. 3 years later, with months of emergency cash and a mess hall he could take leftovers from if he needed them for a good year, she made him little lunchboxes with meat or whatever else she found he liked, and she sat and talked about her day with him. She didn't have to. Either they used bad weapons, cut coupons, stole money, and he took odd jobs. Because he took what they didn't eat home, the cooks at the work cafeteria got to know him by name. Hinata, bless her, had to eat zucchini bread for lunch for 3 days in a row because it wasn't a favorite among T&I employees. That was no longer required. In 6 months after a year, they purchased a television when he realized that the price difference between a quart of milk at the small supermarket in the middle of town and the corner store was negligible. He realized that it didn't matter. They rented movies, purchased new clothes and weapons, and Naruto was at last able to unwind because they were good. They could eat, but work was exhausting and hard, and after leaving, he felt worse. Then Wave appeared. Hinata gave him several slow kisses and ran her fingers through his hair in a comforting scratching motion. He allowed her to cling and fidget with his hands and shirt for a minute or so before he withdrew, muttering that he was ready to get dressed. He eventually heard his clone making advances on her. He had been forced to learn jutsu theory while he was studying under Bastard Sensei. This brought to mind the limited life's reasoning hypothesis, which attempted to explain the behavior of shadow clones as sentient beings who didn't look for ways to extend their lifespan even though they were aware that they had been created arbitrarily and would cease to exist right away. Instead, they simply did their jobs as well as they could and then snuffed it when shadow clones realized they are going to die. They have been known to act recklessly, running straight into weapons, jutsu, and other hazards. Since he was the only person he knew who created shadow clones for purposes like laundry, Naruto felt he could now add a footnote to this theory. They behaved less respectfully and cautiously than their creator, even if you didn't call them upon in combat for this reason. When he said goodbye to Hinata on his way out, she had to respond by putting her tongue around his copy's tongue. Regardless of his personal convictions, he was fairly certain that he would eventually catch them having sex. When he got there, Jiraiya was in T&I, arguing with a stranger Naruto had not yet met. They both stopped talking as he got closer. After giving Jiraiya a nod and examining him with one bandaged eye, the stranger departed. Who was that? Danzo Shimura. He's the one in charge for the time being, until we get a replacement Hokage. Jiraiya stated without showing emotion. You don't get along? He's not my favorite person, no. What did he do? We're in a delicate position right now. Konoha's forces did not get hit as hard as anyone opposing us had hoped yesterday. Anyone who wasn't attacking quickly backed off just in case, but really everyone wanted us to get taken down a few pegs. So we're safe. We had remarkably few casualties, actually the arena's ruined, and everyone has some bumps and scrapes, but only 15 ninja died, 8 of those were genin. That's still not good. Our Hokage is dead, though, so everyone believes we are, which puts us at risk for more attacks. No, it's not, particularly not for future enlisting from civilian families, but it's barely a skinned knee to our military force. Naruto felt a sharp pang at the confirmation and some rage at the conversational way Jiraiya had brought it up. We aren't going to war. No, definitely not officially, and probably not unofficially, either. The current plan is to send a team to Suna as a good faith exercise in about a month. Ibiki approached him and handed him 2 folders. Tamari and Konkuro of the Sand. To do that, we need these kids to cooperate, he said. And I'm convincing them. What? No, you killed their brother, who I'm sure they didn't like very much themselves, but just in case, we're going to make you the bad cop. Who's the good cop? Good morning. Ino strolled in holding a huge, puffy bandage taped to one cheek and coffee when she said, I brought turnovers. This one's cherry. She handed him one. I ate already. You're gonna eat it and you're gonna like it. Ino, Ibiki replied, referring to Naruto's query. Naruto tentatively bit the pastry and asked, are they gonna cooperate and like it, too? Ino straightened and said, you betcha. This is my first official assignment, not counting shadowing anyone, and I'm not messing it up. Good attitude, Naruto. Scare them, Ino. Make them feel at home. We'll start with you while Naruto finishes his breakfast. I ate already, he said once more. He was past another turnover by Ino. Why was he being forced to eat by everyone around him? As the group began to split up, Naruto quickly called Jiraiya to speak before he crept off. I have to ask you about something. What is it? It's about G. Gramps. Jiraiya's expression remained the same, but Naruto had called him with seriousness. A euro when a euro. He was at a loss for words. Ein a euro. He was also about to cry once more. The lump in his throat prevented him from speaking. He was shocked when Jiraiya gathered him in an embrace and gave him a slow back pat. After the Kyuubi secret was revealed and the Sannin was summoned to inspect the seal, Naruto had met Jiraiya. He saw him once a year or sometimes every 2 years after that. He gave Naruto presents and wrote letters even though they were shabby, a stuffed frog at age 12. A pair of shoes too small when he was 8, it made a difference. When he was in town, he took him and Hinata out to eat a couple of times, and he realized they would enjoy the complimentary meal. Other than what was basically a yearly checkup, Naruto had no idea why Jiraiya pretended to have a relationship. When he had received a letter for the first time when he was 6, he had assumed it was an error. After reaching his teens, he came to the conclusion that Jiraiya had chosen to get involved because he felt sorry for the 6-year-old he had been looking for demonic possession, and that he somehow hadn't lost interest in him since then. In any case, the small gestures had amazed him as a child, and now he was beginning to realize that, aside from the adults he had met at work or in training, this was the only adult in his life. When Jiraiya said, you know you don't have to be here today, he was startled out of his reverie. I want to be. Even so, I don't know what kind of a job you'll be doing like this. You need to rest, you need a break. A euro, he continued. With a deep sigh, Naruto said, I have to do something and a euro. He hadn't even finished the thought when Jiraiya's face darkened. In wave. Hinata died and I used the Kyuubi's power, my power. I guess to bring her back, and maybe I could a euro. No, I could bring him back. Do you know what you did to Hinata? His face felt as though the blood had been drained out. What I did to her. No one explained it to you. I thought everyone knew as much as I did. Naruto stood up. You know what this is? What happened to her? Why is she? They both sat down after Jiraiya nodded toward a bench. I have to leave now, so I can't go in depth, but I can give you the bare bones of it. That was a start. You know that you now have the Kyuubi's power. His lips became parched. Yeah, with that, you can make contracts. That's one thing demons can do. To gain power they make deals, grant some wish in exchange for service, and they get a power boost. Jiraiya continued to make eye contact. Inoichi, pull the scenario out of your brain and on paper for us to look at. You brought Hinata back from the dead, in exchange for service. Naruto waited. It's a euro, Jiraiya said, surveying the area. This now seemed too impersonal for the T&I lounge area, which felt like an office. It's a little long to explain. All you need to know, really, is that Hinata agreed to work for you, forever. and won't die until you want her to or until you die yourself. But you know I'm not going to make her do anything she doesn't want to, and I wouldn't do that to the Hokage, either." To calm him, Jiraiya held up a hand. "Hinata agreed to it. Hinata agreed to give you her soul to be alive. The third will not do this." Naruto blinked, but he knew that I wouldn't. He did. Jiraiya replied, "Naruto, it's not that he doesn't want to see you again, but he knew what was coming. Old ninja are rare, extremely rare. There's bounties, there's grudges. Sarutobi could sense something new on the horizon, and he knew it wasn't guaranteed he'd live through it. He was ready. Ready to die. Ready to let go of this village. He'd been looking after it since before the fourth. Naruto, don't forget that." "How could anyone forget the fourth?" Sarcastically, Naruto inquired. With an increasingly irritated frown, Jiraiya said, "Just don't do it. Don't attempt to bring the late Hokage back to life with demonic power. The village needs a new leader." "The guy who isn't your favorite person?" Jiraiya said, "No, and smiled this time. "I'm thinking of someone for the job. Actually well suited. She just doesn't know it yet." Fantastic. In the meantime, Naruto would not receive any more information regarding the specifics of this contract he had with Hinata, and Jiraiya was going to court a woman by offering her command of the Fire Country's military. Hours later, he lay in bed with her, once more unable to sleep, and observed how her hair glinted in the light from their alarm clock. The sun hadn't yet risen. In order to return to him, she had sold her soul. He was not a moron. He was aware that Hinata had many other reasons for wanting to live, but she promised to return to him in that location that he was not permitted to see. She declared her love for him. The contract allowed him to see her every day. The scent of their sheets, her shampoo, and her filled his nostrils as he inhaled. The contract allowed her to live. After giving her a forehead kiss, he stood up and began dressing. Hinata rubbed her eye and asked, "Naruto?" She sat up when she realized what he was doing. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to try and fix something, in the middle of the night." "Yeah, let me come with you. Get dressed." As they crept through the streets to get to his destination, Konoha remained silent. Hinata's eyes proved to be very beneficial, there always. She muttered, "Why are we at a morgue?" "I'm fixing something." "You said that already, but what?" For some reason, Gaara of the Sand was surprised that he was not kept apart from the other invasion casualties. He had never heard anything so loud in his life. As the drawer sliding out, he saw the recognition darken Hinata's eyes. She repeated, "Naruto, what are you doing? When you died, I brought you back." "He tried to kill you." Naruto turned to face the icy boy once more. For a moment, he believed it was ice covering him, but now he realized it was sand. "The Ichibi tried to kill me, not him." "Naruto, have you talked to Jiraiya? Or someone? About this?" "Jiraiya technically didn't say I couldn't, Naruto." He looked her in the eye. "I have to try. Hinata, he might not want to come back, even, but I have to try." She nibbled on her lip, took a step back. Naruto's eyes were closed, focused. "Touch mouth to mouth, consume blood or flesh. I told you not to do this." Jiraiya slammed his fist down on the desk and yelled back. His turn to Hinata caused her to stiffen. "I told you not to go bringing anyone back to life," he said. Jiraiya's genuine anger was a little frightening. "You were with him and you didn't think this would be a bad idea?" "To be honest, I thought what I was seeing was necrophilia. Who kissed a corpse? Who the hell did that? Oh no." She made a gagging sound in response to Naruto rolling his eyes at her. When Jiraiya finally stopped shouting, she asked, "Do you ever think about the consequences of your decisions?" Hinata truly didn't like this push to be more responsible because she was fairly certain Naruto considered the repercussions of his choices constantly, which was one of the reasons she hadn't gotten laid yet. An oopsie baby wasn't even a barrier here, especially since she was most likely no longer able to conceive. "I killed him." "Whoa, that was a bad thing to say." "You killed him in the line of duty. It was him or you. Jiraiya-sama." Jiraiya tensed up and faced the door. Hinata observed Naruto inhaling deeply multiple times. She couldn't blame him for his shaken appearance. This was the most angry Jiraiya had ever been toward either of them. Leaning on his cane, the Hokage substitute, Danzo Shimura, walked in slowly. "You were discussing something?" The revival of Gaara of the Sand. Jiraiya could not have expressed his reluctance more if he had spoken it through his teeth. "Ah well, I don't see that any harm has yet come of it." The Toad Sage's expression went totally blank. Naruto appeared astonished. "You're not mad?" "Not at this instance. No, don't misunderstand me, Chunin Uzumaki," Danzo said with a stern face. "Do not ever use such an ability so rashly ever again, especially if you do not know the consequences." Finally adding her voice, Hinata questioned, "Which are?" Her skin crawled when she saw Danzo's gaze on her. He didn't seem leering or inappropriate. But his silent scrutiny of her was the only thing that had ever made her feel so unhuman. She felt like a patient even in the hospital, where she was being tested to determine her fertility and hooked up to machines that measured the oxygen in her blood. Now she felt like a test subject in front of him. Demonic contracts, like the one you made with Gaara, require an exchange. What did you offer him in return? Danzo turned to face Naruto, and Hinata felt a burden lifted. Naruto's face flushed. I intended to provide him with lodging, pardon me. And, you know, a second chance. You plan to? But you don't remember. Normally, she would think it was adorable to watch the blush tint his ears, but at the moment, she was definitely not feeling it. Give someone a place to stay. Furthermore, when would she be informed of this? No, not quite. Danzo's face remained unchanged. You have weaknesses. Shunin Uzumaki, they can be exploited, and it would at least do to remember what you've traded away to cover your bases in the future. I'm sorry. When Jiraiya muttered something like, oh, he gets Osori, nobody seemed to be listening. Now, for security reasons, we are going to, once again, subject you to the Yamanaka Jutsu to recall what, exactly, you offered Gaara. This is non-negotiable, Danzo said. I understand, and, assuming what you offered wasn't too off the mark, we can accommodate him here in Konoha. He is more than likely to be useful during this time. Naruto paused. I offered Gaara a second chance. He was already used as a killing machine once. I was there for the invasion, Uzumaki-san. I know how well Suna's plan regarding a child mercenary went the first time. Danzo replied. Naruto became even more flushed. Rest assured, you'll be able to see him and we'll look after his mental health carefully. Jinchuriki, or not, is that to your satisfaction? Naruto gave a quick nod. Next is the matter of your training. I believe you have been working with Yamato Nadeshiko so far to learn to control your new demonic chakra? Naruto straightened and said, yes, people seem to be very frugal with their responses to questions like, how the hell can I bring people back to life? Hinata surmised that he was relieved to finally have someone discussing it and not avoiding the conversation. And does Hinata have a limit to how many times she can endure being burned alive or beaten to death before she actually kicks it? She also found it frustrating, but she wished Danzo hadn't been answering their questions. I'm disturbed that you haven't yet learned how to recall enough of yourself to remember what happens during your making contracts. I assume this means that other demonic abilities are similarly unworkable? I didn't know I had other demonic abilities. Jiraiya was mad. Oh. I hadn't introduced them yet, the Toad Sage remarked adamantly. But you were planning on it? Definitely? She didn't believe that, and Naruto clearly didn't either. He had looked at Naruto when he said, I see. Well, in that case, there's not much more for me to say, other than when you were planning on leaving. In 2 weeks. With a raised eyebrow, Naruto asked, you're leaving? We're leaving. She said it aloud this time. Excuse me? With a raised eyebrow, Naruto said, I don't remember talking about this. I was going to bring it up this morning, but I was sidetracked by someone's reckless decision. Both you and me, she thought. I am not intended to be the Hokage permanently, you see, Danzo said. Jiraiya believes he knows a suitable replacement. You will be going with him to retrieve her. Naruto gaped. I have a job, I have rent, the one-eyed man said. The endeavor is an important one, you will be compensated, with ease. Hinata inquired, and how long is it gonna take? Everyone exchanged glances. Yes, that silence did not sit well with her. I think around 3 months, Jiraiya finally stated. 3 months? Hissed Naruto. You see, that's the right response to an abrupt, unforeseen change in life. Regarding the 12-year-old who tried to kill you, moving in with this thing, where do you think I stand? Possibly more, but it's unlikely, Hinata questioned, and we don't get a say in this? After giving it some thought, Jiraiya shook his head. I'd go alone, but 3 months away from the village with no one else around is an excellent opportunity for more intense training where we don't have to worry about civilian safety and property damage. For heaven's sake, they must take into account factors like property damage and safety. Even more concerning than the ridiculousness of it was the fact that Naruto's face told her he was sold after just one glance. Anything for practice. For the entire 10 minutes they were in that room, Danzo excused himself. Jiraiya continued talking about when they would leave, and Hinata fiercely avoided looking at her boyfriend. Okay, so you're mad? Shino's eyebrow went up. I couldn't stop him. He's not completely trained yet, you know that. Ants were drawn to Shino's dango, which remained at his feet. Akamaru would have nothing to do with it now that it was on the ground. And, anyway, it's not like I told him to grab it from you. Shino could see a familiar girl walking toward them, hands deep in her pockets, making a good storm cloud impression. Just a short distance behind his teammate Kiba approached, but he ignored her, shouting a hello instead. She raised her head. She was attractive even though his teammate hadn't actually mentioned it. He could see Kiba's point there, he didn't have to, it was emblazoned on his pheromones. When Kiba saw her, he flushed his face and his pheromones. She recalled, "Hey Shino, right? It was a first, and, Inuzuka Kiba? I'm sorry, I might have forgotten your first name." He seemed to like her. "Kiba," his teammate said, as bashfully as he could manage, "have some dango with us." "I couldn't, please do." Kiba's paying. "Why? Akamaru has knocked my food out of my hand for the second time this week." She chuckled despite his reddening face. Kiba accepted it, saying, "I'm ordering you one anyway, so you'd better join us." She sat down with them on the bench and scratched Akamaru behind the ears, saying, "Well, okay, but you guys gotta let me pay you back with tea sometime." Shino was even more impressed when the Inuzuka returned from the store with a pot to wash down their sweets with, because he knew Kiba disliked tea and was likely already dreading the tea the attractive girl had promised. Even Kiba noticed the slight gloom that returned to her face when she was reminded of her morning meal. "Ooh, that looks great. I didn't really eat a big breakfast." "Did something happen?" "It's nothing, my boyfriend and I are fighting, but that's not unusual, just ask my teammates." Shino believed he could hear Kiba's heart splintering. Shino dropped a napkin in front of her to distract her from his comrade's kicked puppy face. She leaned to pick it up, and he thanked her and apologized for the inconvenience. Kiba asked, "What are you fighting about?" after indulging in a whole stick of danzo in a moment of comfort eating. "Hey, a euro," she grumbled, "he was gonna invite someone to live with us without asking me first." That was really impolite. Kiba used the F word to convey a similar idea. She chuckled, "Yeah, that's how I feel. Anyway, it's not gonna happen now, so I guess it doesn't matter. I'm still mad, though." That is understandable. Kiba in particular, who appeared prepared to confront the unidentified boyfriend at this very moment when his teammate bent to pick up his napkin again. Shino dropped it for the second time and gave her a pointed glance over her head. Kiba gave an eye roll. She took a stick of dango and said, "Anyway, tell me what you guys have been up to." Akamaru's muzzle closed over the round candies, and Hinata released them in shock, revealing more delicious dumplings on the ground. Kiba's loud reprimand, "Akamaru, how could you do that? That wasn't yours," more than made up for his lack of action when Shino had been subjected to the same treatment 10 minutes prior. It seems that when Shino's sweets were compromised, he needed breasts to get this kind of response from the dog owner. As the Aburame eventually had a chance to eat, Hinata laughed, Kiba apologized, and the two began talking about Akamaru's misbehavior. "So, a cozy place ya got her €1, over 2 fruit baskets and no fewer than 7 bouquets of flowers." Sasuke scowled at Naruto. The blonde was trying very hard not to laugh, and he could tell by the way he was sucking his lips. And he guessed it was hilarious. When he killed the biggest threat to the village, he received the chunin. While he sprained his wrist and got stabbed for being careless, he received half a Konoha gift shop. He hadn't even begun on the pile of cards that had been written to him. Hinata had stacked them in order of most expensive looking while she'd been here, and she and Sakura had argued about whether gold script was tacky or not, which made the task any more appealing. "What do you want? I had some time to kill and I thought I'd check in on you." "Why?" Naruto sighed. "Seemed like a nice thing to do. I'll go if you don't feel like talking." "You already know what I want to talk about." On his nightstand, Naruto rearranged the flowers. He then piled the unopened chocolate boxes on top of the ones that had been opened by his teammates. He then arranged the pile of cards. To let the Chunin know he expected answers, Sasuke exhaled through his nose for a long time, clearly irritated. After opening a box that neither girl had liked enough to finish when there were more to try, Naruto questioned, "Do you seriously not like these?" "I haven't tried them." "Why yet?" Was a high-pitched, grating sound. "Oh, you've gotta." Sasuke was shocked when Uzumaki pulled up a chair, placed the box over his legs, and took a round piece of chocolate out of it. "They're sea salt caramel, they're good." Sasuke consumed one, but the taste was overpowering and did not lift his spirits. "Gaara is alive. Let's get started." "He escaped?" "No, I brought him back to life like I did to Hinata on the bridge." I learned that the chocolate's flavor was greatly influenced by the conversation taking place over them. Sasuke discovered that he detested sea salt caramel. "You did the same to Gaara from Suna?" "Why?" "It's complicated, it just seemed like the right thing to do. A sense of morality about a combatant he had met." "What the devil? But you managed to do this twice now, so you know how to control it?" "No, as an interrogator, he was genuinely ignorant of how to use his tone to persuade others to believe him. I can do it, but there's consequences, and so far we don't know what they are." Sasuke grabbed another piece of chocolate. "I'm guessing you're working on that?" "Yes. Naruto's blonde brows furrowed over a penetrating blue gaze too intense for the task of twisting paper, and Sasuke observed his mien as he tinkled with the chocolate wrappers. Despite the conversation, he appeared restless, with tense broad shoulders if he was trying to win someone over without giving them the information they wanted for weeks on end. Sasuke figured he might be, too. However, he had tried and Sasuke had to assume it wasn't a bad one based on the long face Uzumaki was pulling. It wasn't healthy to purposefully avoid talking to sane people when everyone else he knew was insane. And he was the only sensible person Sasuke regularly interacted with. Fangirls did have their uses, despite their flagrant disrespect for his privacy. Is there a basket with tomatoes somewhere? Naruto chewed another piece of chocolate and blinked. Yeah, by the door. Can you bring me one? You want to eat a tomato? Because of, you can take every sea salt caramel box home with you if you just bring the damn basket of tomatoes over here. As instructed, the other nin lifted both hands in a gesture of mock surrender, opened the basket, rubbed the dust off one fat red nin, and tossed it to him, biting into the fruit. Sasuke was mildly amused by Uzumaki's horrified expression. Before the nurse arrived to check on Sasuke's bandages and bring him dinner, they snacked and talked to his chagrin. The Uchiha felt lonely when Naruto left. You're finally home. Naruto dropped his keys and exclaimed, shit. In the dim light that filtered into the hall from their kitchen, the metal gleamed. Hinata's eyes gleamed in the shadows, just as unsettling. Damn it, that's creepy as hell. Hinata. Why are all the lights off? Crossing her arms over the t-shirt she slept in, she flipped the switch. "'Cause I was going to bed. Where were you?" "I visited Sasuke at the hospital. Visiting hours go until 9? He showed her the bag he was holding tightly and said, "I got some milk, and Sasuke gave us all the caramel chocolates he got." "Nice of him. You wanna say what you're thinking?" She dropped her arms after shifting her weight from foot to foot. "What the hell was last night? Everything about it. Start to finish. You know how many people he killed?" "A lot, and so have I. So what makes him different?" "He couldn't control it." Hinata, her voice was becoming hysterical as she said, "Oh, of course not being able to control when and who you kill is what makes you safe to have around." She closed her mouth and said, "Listen to me." Her gaze remained fixed on him and widened even more. As if to make up for it, he put the bags down, walked over to her, and held her gaze while saying, "His childhood is exactly like mine." He was angry because of his own memories, and Hinata was supporting him. He had that thing inside of him and didn't know it. People were scared of him. They tried to hurt him and he hurt them back. You know that's not true. The way he killed during the exam. He was bloodthirsty because of the demon. Hinata, so am I. Not like him. Naruto, offended. He blinked. Are you serious? Exactly like him. I don't like that. I like it. Hinata, but it's true. Did you think it wasn't? Determined, she crossed her arms. You hurt your enemies, Naruto, but you saw his siblings. Even they were scared of him. They were scared of him growing up, too. No kidding? Hinata, he said, taking her arms and bending down to meet her gaze. I had you as a friend when we were kids, then Jiraiya, the Hokage, and an Oiyuro. He had no one, only the one tails whispering to him all the time. He watched her shoulders calm down in comprehension in order to emphasize the point. It could have been me. She moved closer, her lips parted, and she put her arms around him. After a brief exchange, he moved aside to place the milk in the refrigerator. She trailed after him. Okay, that was part 1. Fuck. Oh, part 2 is this idea you have that inviting someone to live with us is something you can do without talking to me about it first. There was no way he was going to sleep tonight, was there? I just assumed that since I pay the rent, I could give a friend the couch for a while. She said nothing. All right. That was surprisingly successful. Was there a part 3? She turned and walked away in a manner that did not give him the impression that it could wait. It can wait. No, what is it? It's your 3-month training trip, but now's not the time. Oh, he touched her shoulder as he followed her face twisted in pain. Hey, of course I don't want to go. I understand that training is important, she said, shaking her head. Right, but, he said, placing his arms around her waist and drawing her close to him. You know I'd rather be here, right? He kissed her, feeling comforted when she encircled him with her arms and gave him a forceful kiss in return. I mean it. Her fingers slipped under his shirt, their tongues touched, and he found himself not really caring if he went to bed soon or not when he pulled on her hair. She responded with a breathy sigh that woke him up more effectively than a caffeine pill. The gentle sensation on Naruto's chin and above his left eyebrow, which indicated that he could anticipate enormous pimples there shortly, served as an early warning that today would be less than usual. Hinata couldn't relate to his problems with oily or overly dry skin because she had incredibly clear and soft skin that she attributed to eating her vegetables and drinking lots of water. With one hand tucked under her and the other reaching for him, Hinata turned to face him in their bed. Her face was serene and unconcerned. While she slept, he gave in to the urge to peck her white forehead after her bangs were blown out of her face. With her eyes closed, she pulled a leg out from under the blanket and slung it over his hip as she edged closer to him, eyeing the lines their blinds left on her thigh. He placed his palm in the crook of her knee. Hold on, the sun had set. Greedy for normalcy, he wriggled away from her and drew the blinds apart to gaze hungrily at the sunrise. Behind him, Hinata groaned, "Turn that off, it's the sun." "Turn it off." Crawling back into bed, he did so. "I think I'm late for work." "Clock says you're not. You didn't open your eyes to look." "I don't have to. Remember? You used the Byakugan to check the time?" "I'm referring to my omnipotence." He leaned over her and kissed her a couple of times before getting out of bed and putting on his work clothes. "Oh, of course, how could I forget?" he asked. "Are you gonna be home before bedtime tonight? Probably don't wait to eat dinner or anything, though I think I'm talking to Gaara today and his siblings." Her expression made it clear to him that she was not impressed. Well, whatever, he wasn't. The boy had mentioned being hated, but his conversation with Gaara in the location where he had discovered his soul had been inconclusive. It wasn't until Naruto said that the Ichibi was no longer inside him that he wanted to return. "So I'm normal now?" "Well, you won't be if you come back. You'll be sorta undead, but you won't have a demon in you." "And then what?" "My family won't just accept me back, they hate me." "It'll help you, I owe you, you know, for accidentally killing you. Not that you'll be too popular in Konoha. Either almost everyone here hates me for the same reason, but a few people don't. They'd probably warm up to you, too." And that was sufficient persuasion for Gaara to grudgingly consent to reviving. "And now? How's it going?" Gaara's gaze was icy and slightly offended. "They're feeding me, but that's about it." "Well, you're in T and I didn't expect to wake up in T and I." Naruto flinched. "It's a precaution. You were the main force in assaulting Konoha. We want to see what you know." "About the invasion?" "Not much. Father just decided to team up with Otto after a meeting with their cage, and I was their trump card." "Do you know any details of the exchange between your father and the Otto cage?" "It was very private. They had one really long meeting, and from then on it all seemed arranged. I didn't pay too much attention. All I was told was that we were going to be invading you during the Chunin exams. I was just looking forward to Euro." He avoided eye contact. "Killing." Naruto nodded, and the boy's face lit up with obvious relief at the realization. "Do you know anything about Otto in general?" "No, I'm sorry. I'm really not a wealth of information. Near the end I didn't pay attention to anything but who I could kill, and who was pointing me where." He went on since Naruto couldn't stand the taste of deceit from him. "You're under serious watch, but I'm making an exception to your imposed isolation right here, in front of me, with clearance granted by my supervisor at Euro." Gaara's eyebrows went up. Naruto simply waved at the one-way glass to Ino, who was waiting for him, since he had no idea how to segue into it. Tamari and Kankuro of the Sand shuffled in as the door opened. Gaara tensed. Gaara was seated next to Naruto, the siblings opposite, and Ino on the end of the three chairs she brought in. With a melodic, calming voice and that sympathetic social worker lilt, she said, "We're going to start with something simple, like, just look at each other and say, hi." Sakura was starting to feel the effects of her fourth cup of iced coffee. While Sasuke was in the hospital, classes were cancelled since the invasion. It was instructed that she and Hinata practice on their own schedule and attempt to complete at least one in-village mission roughly every 3 days. For some reason, she wasn't being called upon as frequently as she had anticipated, and she had a ton of free time after adding her name to the volunteer roster for Konoha's military and civilian hospitals and providing aid twice. Naturally, she proceeded to the library to research Uzumaki further. She had assumed that she would find information on demons and unholy energy in the small section on sealing, which was tucked away in the dusty back corner of her second favorite ninja library. Within this small section was an even smaller subsection for summoning. The only thing she could find on demonic summons was cultural superstition, so this proved to be useless. The energy book was then discovered. She was looking through a book on conducting chakra to do seal work effectively when she came across a section on holy and unholy energy. This was the closest thing she had yet to see to Uzumaki's dark chakra. The table of contents was covered in what appeared to be dried jam. The superficial blessings given by shrine priests are the most prevalent use of holy energy. Even though priests today do not come into contact with unholy energy as frequently or with the same intensity as they did in the past, effective sealing may still require the practice of concentrating energy into an exclusively holy charge. Almost nothing had anything to do with her priorities. Another book that was reportedly out of print and unavailable anywhere in Konoha was mentioned in the bibliography. The librarian asked her to check again in the coming days and promised to call the next town on her behalf. In contrast, Festivals and culture accounted for nearly all of the religion. Section 2 books described possession, but one was a dramatic retelling of a hoax, and the other said nothing about battling the demons. In fact, it mainly reiterated that everyone was a dirty sinner and vulnerable to demonic pursuit, and that sex before marriage was the cause of all horrible things. Why didn't this stuff have a catalog of some kind? For example, she could search for demons or unholy energy and find a list of references. How were the scientists around the world spending their time? She read for 6 hours a euro, well, 5.5. She had taken a lunch break a euro, and gained no new appreciation for Hinata's ability to put up with elderly women telling her she was going to hell. She would cry. As the main channel's annoying celebrity look-alike short began to play, the silenced TV in the library's lobby suddenly filled her vision with bright green light. One of the girls in Tea Country looked like another who was going to play the lead in a Demon Slayer movie. I'm really flattered, especially since I want to be a priestess when I grow up. Really? Yes, exactly like the Sannin Tsunade? Sakura gave a blink. Was the Sannin Tsunade a priestess? Her doubts appeared to be shared by the reporter. She had a significant, holy woman, phase, which is something that most people are unaware of. She trained alongside them as she advanced in the ninja ranks, making her the poster child for one of the Leaf Village's shrines. Every day you learn something new. The reporter swooned and immediately drew attention to himself. Sakura rushed to the biography section after dropping her stack of books onto a cart. Konoha's famous ninja was the subject of a ton of books. Finding what she needed took hardly 5 minutes, and obtaining the address of the shrine where Tsunade had studied took 10 more. Sarutobi had been given plenty of time by Danzo. Actually, 16 years, nothing to show for it. Although it was more important for the third to keep Danzo away from the Jinchuriki than for him to give the third time, that was neither here nor there. As the Kyuubi Cantainer's power increased, he was placed in torture and interrogation rather than being prepared for his role. He was also denied access to the outside world until a recent brief excursion to Wave. Take a look at what transpired when the monk on duty at Danzo's local shrine found out about the Kyuubi's merger and its specifics. He was pleasantly surprised by the sizable donation he received. A power transfer that is seamless, giving Naruto Uzumaki complete control and gradually altering his chakra without causing any harm to his coils. The reason? A yearning for a Konoha Kunoichi who was still alive, well, and completely governed by the state. At last, the gods had chosen to be kind to him. The boy's frustration with Jiraiya's concealment of information was the cherry on top. Did the sage lose sight of what 16 was like? Being in the dark was something that young people detested, resented being patronized. They were yours for the molding. All you had to do was give them a few secrets and some care. Danzo finally made the decision to speak with Naruto Uzumaki after he had been battling the Sand siblings for almost a week. Jiraiya was attempting to be as amiable as possible because he was leaving the day after tomorrow, but it was cutting it close because Naruto had always left the room in a positive mood the previous few days, and he needed him to be irritated in order to have an effect. The guards on the other side of the glass were grimacing as the tensions between the former Ichibi container and the one who had brought him back from the dead finally reached a breaking point. It was late, and the workday had undoubtedly been long as Uzumaki attempted to tie up all the loose ends before his trip. The first boy didn't believe him when he demanded to be released, and the other boy lacked the authority to comply. Danzo called out, "Uzumaki-san," as the blonde, with a thundercloud-like face, made his way back to his office. He was surprised by the address. "Yes? Danzo-sama?" he asked. "I wanted to speak with you before you departed for your training with Jiraiya." "Of course, how can I help you? I think I can assist you," Danzo said as they started to walk to Uzumaki's office. "I don't mean to delay you. I know you are probably very much wanting to go home and spend what little time you have with Miss Hyuga before you leave." She goes by Uzumaki. Actually, how charming. In addition to being annoying, he would have preferred to have more influence within that clan. The elders of the Hyuga were one thing, but they had to pass away eventually, so the younger generation needed a voice. The girl was obviously not loved by her family, but she might be more popular with her siblings than some elderly people they only saw on special occasions. "My apologies, I was saying I know you are leaving for your training trip soon. Not soon enough, I would say." Uzumaki laughed out loud. "And I wanted to make sure you knew that you absolutely have more than one source of knowledge at your disposal. But I can't possibly return to Konoha to train with you when we're going to be so far." "No, that's not what I meant. You will definitely have access to any resource I am in charge of here in the village when you are here, of course, but what I am getting at for your trip is information. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Jiraiya, but I am concerned about your progress in manipulating the Kyuubi chakra." It was a catchphrase. The boy's gaze was riveted to his when the greatest tailed beast was mentioned. "While I do think some arts are better left untouched, I would never tolerate incompetence in someone who has the Kyuubi chakra at his disposal." Jiraiya tends to be conservative with his traditional teachings. You might find yourself grasping smoke when it comes to the more powerful techniques or anything that might lean towards the darker side of the practice. Take this. Before he could say the final word, the boy's hand was out and he clutched the piece of stationery. He dropped into it as if it were precious. This stamp will guarantee that any correspondence you send me ends up on my desk rather than in a stack of red tape that a secretary might look through. Do not be afraid to seek my advice. I'm grateful. Danzo-sama. The appreciation was charming. Enjoy your travels. Snacks are easily accessible and appear delicious. Sheets are clean, condoms are on the nightstand. Candles are lit and away from anything that could catch fire. Hinata has practiced on a banana multiple times to ensure that it won't be an issue tonight. Her hair was in its perfectly soft day 2 stage of washing. She hadn't put any product in it yesterday specifically so she could keep it this way. Makeup was finished just in time for her boy's anticipated arrival. She hadn't wanted to frighten him, so she'd thrown a dress over the fancy underwear, but it just made the straps itchier. And she had borrowed lingerie from Ino on the condition that she call her tomorrow morning to relay details to Yuro. Her boobs were spilling out of it, but it was black and lacy, so it would do. This was it. It was inevitable, otherwise Naruto could not be permitted to wander aimlessly through fire country. She heard his key in the door as she fluffed their bed's pillows for the 50th time. When he called, "I'm home," she called back, "Welcome," but remained in her place. "Are you in bed already? It's so early," she heard him putting his keys and bag down and hanging up his jacket. Not exactly, she kept to herself. He stopped when he reached their room's doorway. "What's all this?" As if the roses and candles in the room weren't enough to explain it. Holding eye contact, she said, "I want to give you something to remember me by before you leave," and approached slowly. "Hina Yuro." He managed to swallow. "Let me make you feel good, Naruto." The kiss lasted for the 3 seconds they wandered over to the bed, and then she made the mistake of trying to get naked. The first obstacle appeared. His hands found her waist and then went up into her hair, and hers trailed over his front until she found the hem of his shirt and pulled it over his head. The irony is that he was staring at her breasts the entire time. He said, "We don't have to do this, Hina." "I want to a Yuro," she said, crossing the dress to begin sewing his belt. "Hina, I don't need sex to remember you by, all right, so how about as a parting gift?" She pushed his pants down, gave him another kiss, and then pushed him onto the bed. "There's nothing that says it has to be now." He grabbed her waist and rolled them over so he was on top of her, their foreheads touching, as she mounted him. "Apart from that, we both want it to be now. I'm perfectly fine with it being later, Hina." "So, you wish to hold off until marriage?" "No, it is not always the case," he explained, stroking the back of her neck lightly, "just until nobody can say that we're not serious." She blinkingly said, "Naruto, how is this related to anyone else? I don't want to give those people any more ammunition than they already have." "Well, first of all, those people already believe that we are sleeping together," Hinata said, blowing her bangs out of her face and pushing him onto his back. "We share a home. We don't need to take many more steps to start those rumors. Second, even if we had been well behaved since we were 13, they would still claim that we lacked self-control and were boning," she said, mounting him once more. "Do you know why? Since they're terrible." "Third," she said, leaning in and giving him the sweetest kiss she could manage, "I really want to have a steamy night in with my boyfriend before he leaves on a 3-month trip." She unhooked the hell bra and dropped it on the floor, causing one of Naruto's hands to twitch significantly in the direction of her left breast before stopping halfway and landing on her waist. As Hinata ran her fingers over his scalp, she saw his face shift from understanding to joy. "Have I persuaded you?" In his ear, she purred. Hard to debate an argument that compelling, he conceded, and took her breast into his mouth, sucking with enough pressure that it hurt. It took her a moment to realize when she gasped at the display of force, and tugged his hair harshly to return the favor, and she leaned back and touched her forehead to his. Mimicking him from a minute earlier, he kissed her hard, and a toe-curling release of chakra took over her, causing her to stop and moan. "So, do you possess a condom?" Yes, I do." It was hurried, clumsy, and they kept laughing, but that was okay a Yuro, better than okay. She had not orgasmed, but she hadn't set her expectations that high for their first time, and Naruto didn't seem particularly self-conscious about it. After taking a shower and changing into cozy pajamas to cuddle in front of the TV, the clothes, tingly feeling persisted every few minutes. Naruto would press a kiss to her neck or temple, and she would nuzzle against him, giving him pecks on the shoulder or collar. Just as they were waddling back to bed and she was shaking the flower petals off their covers, she kind of wished she hadn't gone all out now. Naruto approached her from behind and kissed her over her neck and shoulders once more until she turned to face him. She was so engrossed in how good she felt that she didn't think there was any room for improvement. "Please be careful while I'm away," she whispered. "I'm going to be alright, and you be safe while you're gone. We're not entirely sure about that, thus exercise caution. I cherish you." She held him tightly for a long time before releasing her hold, and it took him a few more seconds to release her. "Why are you in this place? I assumed you resided in the town center." Sakura turned to see Sasuke holding 2 grocery bags in his one good hand while he looked expectantly at her. "Research," she said, shrugging, staring at the shrine's entrance with a look of anxiety on her face and holding a square of paper like a lifeline. "You spend your free time studying monks?" Sasuke inquired. He had assumed Sakura was interested in medical jutsu and him, so it was astounding to hear that she had other interests. It was as though she were a real person. "It's about Chunin Uzumaki. He comes here. However, Hinata is closer to you than I am." "No," she sighed. "Are you familiar with the concepts of holy and unholy chakras?" Makoto Uchiha had been very devoted in her belief of the spirits and small deities that she swore occupied their woods, and his father had not discouraged it, always emphasizing the importance of being respectful of their surroundings. The question unwittingly took him back to his mother's lap as they read mythology books about the rabbit goddess and her many suitors. Itachi had still been home lots at the time. He suddenly felt uncomfortably open to Sakura, who blinked at him with large, green eyes, saying, "I know that everything's just a mix of the two. My mother used to say that there was no such thing. That there is no such thing as holy or unholy, but that everything is merely a circle with darker areas than others." Huh? Seeing her doubt that, he became angry, asking why his beliefs were any more implausible than hers. "Well, I'm researching it, and this is my first lead." "What connection does it have to Uzumaki?" "I think the chakra he has the one that makes me react. I think that's because it's dark." "Isn't the library a better place to conduct research?" "You'd think," she snorted. "I began this morning there nothing that wasn't infused with political morality." "And you believe that priests will be superior? Are you coming in with me or not?" she asked, rolling her eyes. He said, "Well, with that attitude but accompanied her all the way to the gate." He didn't realize he'd been acting strange until Sakura actually stopped to stare at him as they entered the grounds. A painful prickle began on the right side of his neck and didn't go away no matter how he rolled his shoulder. "Is there a problem?" "I'm fine." As she said the final sentence, she appeared to realize that she had been impolite and covered her mouth in apology, but she did not take back her statement. "You were tossing your head around like a horse." "It's fine, I'll deal with it." Sakura's flattery had them sitting in a dusty shed surrounded by stacks of books and scrolls taller than themselves, the priest cheerfully pulling out records and newspaper clippings related to Tsunade of the Sanin, after she gave him a doubtful look but continued walking, searching for any sign of someone who worked there. "Is there anything you can show us about her studies?" Sakura asked, and the priest, still elated from her earlier boosting his ego, nodded enthusiastically and shuffled out of the shed. There was no good reason for him to be standing there with an itchy nose, a growing pain in his neck, and grocery bags that seemed to be getting heavier by the minute just to watch her work, but he didn't mind all that much because she seemed to be in her element here, not chatting or trying to flirt, but seriously and carefully researching. Sasuke watched her snoop around the old editorials about one of their famous ninja, writing down other references on the little piece of paper she brought with a pen she had purchased at some point. "Oh, we're here now." Sakura's face briefly brightened as the priest hurried inside carrying a stack of books, but then she realized. "Well, thank you so much for making the effort to bring these for me, sir, but..." Well, they were clearly children's books. The top one featured a picture of a dancing cat on a bright yellow background, and the ones beneath it were identical. "We were trying to find text messages, something from which we could learn." Sasuke took one he recognized from the unstable pile, the Rabbit Queen's garden. He recalled that there was some kind of paradise there, and that a shadow or something tried to control the animals there, so the queen threw him out. Itachi had been too old for the story when their mother had read it to them both, but he had sat and listened with Sasuke, humming agreements when his younger brother had pressed sticky fingers over the illustrations of berries and soft animals, asking if they could get a rabbit. It was difficult with one hand, but he opened the book and turned the pages while Sakura tried to get the priest to allow her to see what she had come for. If this had been his copy, it would have had a stain on the third to last page from when he spilled grape juice on it when he was 4 years old. Fresh fall air blew in through the small breeze that fluttered the decorative strips of paper hanging from the shed's roof, and a few dead leaves scattered across the main pathway, making a scraping sound on the concrete. The thought of Hinata wearing a nice kimono made him wonder if there was a temple that the Uzumaki visited, and he mentally laughed at the idea that she would need Naruto's assistance just to put one on, let alone get up and walk all the way down to a place of worship. Naruto didn't seem religious at all, but he would look good in a kimono because he had that lean frame that could pull one off. Kun Sasuke. Sakura grinned at him while holding a shaky stack of texts beneath her chin. I'm all set, if you wanted to leave. He's lending them to you. Gathering the groceries he had put down to rest his hand, he asked. Yes. I'm going to use them to study, she said, feeling much more energized now. What should I study? How could a kunoichi waste time learning about priesthood? Holy chakra. By the end of the training trip, Naruto had only learned from Jiraiya how to properly drink and dash at 4-star establishments. Remember, that was only when they came to a stop in a town. After a few days, it became clear that Jiraiya would not be training him every day, so Naruto began doing simple strength training exercises and stretching before they left each morning, something Jiraiya didn't acknowledge for the most part. They were on the road, walking from one place to another, with an automobile rumbling by every couple of hours, kicking up dust and making him sneeze. To a certain degree, he had been anticipating this. He was aware that Jiraiya occasionally needed to be coerced into training, and that it might be more difficult now that they were following this new and controversial discipline, but he hadn't exactly planned on idly wandering fire country for weeks on end and doing nothing but losing weight. A quick check on a scale in a store in the last town they visited showed that he'd lost 7 pounds since they'd left Konoha. He wasn't happy. He had expressed his displeasure, asking Jiraiya what they would be doing nearly every other day, and when he replied, walking, Naruto didn't hide his disappointment. When Naruto mentioned that he had only left Konoha for training, Jiraiya drew lead, easy, adding that he wasn't yet prepared for a lot of this stuff. First, I'd like to see where you are. In response, Jiraiya simply shrugged. That'd be a lot easier if you could perform some sort of assessment first, Naruto said. Although Naruto shouldn't let alcohol be held responsible for every significant moment in his career, he most likely wouldn't have advanced much for another 2 weeks at the very least if it weren't for the buzz. As usual, Jiraiya led them to a hotel, this time a shabby little one on the outskirts of a town, dropped some names and some cash, and pretty soon they were in the arms of a lanky woman who told them she was an entertainer. A bottle of champagne was passed around, then another, and maybe one more, and at one point Naruto realized he was more than tipsy, that Jiraiya's laugh was really annoying, and that he could see the entertainer's nipples through her dress, and that he didn't want to. When the noise became unbearable, he made the decision to go to the lobby and stare at the phone, wondering if he should call his girlfriend and mope. 25% of him wanted some sympathy from a pretty girl, while 75% of him thought it was a bad idea to call her while intoxicated, especially since he hadn't done it yet on this trip and she might be upset with him if this was the first time. She would probably be showering and eating something before bed, or applying night cream or lotion. As it was 11 o'clock a week prior to his departure, she and Ino had started a new skincare regimen that, although it was annoying how much time she had to spend in the bathroom, left her feeling even softer to the touch and smelling like rose hips at night. Naruto felt as though he had just witnessed someone sneeze in his hot chocolate before receiving it, but he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, leaned his overheated forehead against the metal phone booth, and allowed the image of Hinata to resurface after his master's loud cackle momentarily broke the fantasy. If he was home, they could cuddle and fall asleep on the couch again, or engage in some other similarly intimate activity. She preferred to sleep in shorts and oversized t-shirts, but since it was getting colder, he assumed she would be curled up in his filthy old sweatpants, which made his butt appear 5 inches lower than it actually was when he wore them. The sage's high-pitched laughter reverberated through Jiraiya's skull as he whooped and at least 4 women shrieked in response. Fuck this! Grabbing Jiraiya by the collar of his shirt, he stomped into the party room, past a bellhop, past 5 other women who had wandered in after the first, and hauled up, his frustration making the show of strength effortless. What the devil? Tomorrow, I'm going home. Pardon me? You old bastard, I didn't come out here to watch you hike across the entire damn country and grope women? Oh, what's causing you to feel uncomfortable? You can't hold your liquor, can you? You should know better than to let one of your children drink some juice. Jiraiya stammered, and Naruto struck him squarely in the jaw. Stop giving me that crap. Don't a euro. You've been attempting to persuade me to drink at every dreadful breakfast bar we visit. Did you give your girlfriend a call? Is she pleased that you're giving her a call at last? She is upset that you had to get hammered too? Sanin just grabbed Jiraiya's wrist and twisted to get him to release it, then yanked him back with enough force that Naruto flew and struck the wall. Naruto jumped the table and seized Jiraiya by the collar once more. He was unable to breathe for a moment, so he lay on his back and stared up at the ceiling while he felt bile rise in his throat. Eventually, he had to throw up and rolled over to spit out the foul-smelling material onto the carpet, which didn't look much better after the incident. Jiraiya rambled, "Damn, I was aiming for the window at Euro. What on earth is the matter with you?" When the acid entered his nose, Naruto coughed, moaned, sneezed, got up slowly, and hobbled out of the room. "Where are you heading?" "In order to catch the first bus back to Konoha, I'm going the fuck to bed." Although there were no buses that went directly to Konoha, he could at least board one that went that way, which was much more convenient than walking. Following in his wake, Jiraiya paid no attention to the bashful, Jiraiya-sama about that tablia Euro? And additional questions that were piling up behind him. "It seems like you're as cool as a cucumber. I assumed that if I poked you enough, Uzumaki's temper would show, but apparently not." Naruto disregarded him. "Well, the only person I ever met was your mother. However, she had enough of one for me to understand the main idea." "My what?" Jiraiya leaned against the lobby's paper-thin wall and smiled gently at him as he slowly turned to face the Toad Sage, and Naruto knew instantly that he was completely Sabera Euro. Whatever the display in the party room was, it had nothing to do with the man's level of alcohol consumption. "Like your girl, actually. She used to get so worked up that her face would turn red. She also had a cute round face and red hair, so she looked like a tomato when she was upset." "You knew my mother?" "You?" Naruto swayed, feeling far too inebriated for this discussion. "Her name was Kushina. What kept you from telling me this?" "It was kinda a secret." "Why?" "Well, if you think you can wait to jump on the bus home until after you hear the story at Euro." When the world continued to spin after he finished, Naruto rolled his eyes and immediately felt regret. However, Jiraiya placed a heavy hand on his shoulder and said, "Come on, you're taking a shower and heading to bed. We should probably wait to talk until you aren't in danger of throwing up. I'll tell you about your mother tomorrow." He trailed off, raising his eyebrows, "and tomorrow we'll start training for real." What is this? What does it look like?" Anko snorted. "Why are you giving me a dildo?" Hinata blinked, knowing what it was and not being too shy to say it aloud. "It's a vibrator. Okay, a Euro. It's also a pleasant one. There are 3 power settings. And, this is for me." "Yep. Why?" "Because you are a strong, confident woman, in charge of her own orgasms." "Yeah, I don't really a Euro. At least you're trying, and you're taking it. Take a bath after working out, and then use this before bed. It will assist you in falling asleep." "What the devil, Anko?" Rolling her eyes, the older woman said, "I gave one to Ino, too. That in no way makes this less weird. I just don't want you guys having sex before you even know how to come." "I know where my clit is, Anko." Fantastic. Hinata grimaced and Anko arched an eyebrow, saying, "What are you so freaked out about? Use this on it." "My boyfriend's supervisor from work gave me a vibrator on what's supposed to be a really vanilla lunch date." "I don't know what vanilla means," Anko grinned. Hinata snorted and put the sex toy in her bag, saying, "Obviously. Tell me about your life." Anko's unexpected lunch invitation was quite unexpected. Although she had previously spoken to her and loved her, they never really spent time together, and Naruto was apprehensive about her meeting coworkers, which she understood somewhat because they all tortured people for a living and most likely didn't host holiday parties that he could take her to anyhow. When Naruto left, she had a fleeting urge to get things done, so she rolled with it and cleaned the entire apartment, including cleaning the dust off the insides of the vents, and unintentionally finding Naruto's secret porn magazines, which were hilarious to look through a Euro. Apparently he liked kink. However, she soon ran out of things that made her feel productive because she couldn't find a job when she was her. She was only allowed to work at crappy manual labor jobs because no one would let her babysit anything for fear of her bad influence. As a genin, she needed written permission from her instructor to pursue a C rank without a team, and, to be fair, Kakashi granted it, but with the warning that, if it interferes with training, you're back to no C ranks. Training went well for a while. Sakura and Sasuke caught Kakashi's attention because she was gradually getting better from a number of minor injuries, but it soon became clear that Sakura was far behind her. As a result, Kakashi made up for it, making Hinata the symbolic middle child. After another week, Ino scrapped their exercise plans and instead took Hinata to a nearby kennel to play and walk with the animals. Allah. Here's your productive thing, now stop fucking moping. This is how she ran into Kiba once more. He was one of the sweetest boys she had ever met, and when he excitedly asked her if she wanted a dog, she felt her self-worth drop as she said, "I don't think that's a good idea for me." According to him, he and Akamaru went to the kennel almost every week to volunteer and train the animals. Usually, he said, He tried to look for puppies or just young dogs that had a chance of becoming nin animals, which would mean he could adopt them into the Inuzuka kennels and out of this depressing place, but that was rare, so he just did his best to give them a good time while he could. Well, why not? My boyfriend's not a fan. Naruto had an episode and ate it. At least he'd scare the shit out of it. Animals didn't like him now that she thought about it. It was strange that Akamaru liked her at all, considering that she was unquestionably no longer human. Kiba laughed strangely and said, "Oh, that sucks. I don't think I like this guy." "I know," she said, laughing with him. "I'm going to get an animal if I ever live somewhere that permits them in any case. Akamaru, dogs are superior to boys in agreement." The giant of fluff licked enthusiastically across her face. Kiba put a hand on his heart. "I don't disagree with you, but I'm hurt that you'd say that to my face," he said. They began spending more time together, usually with Shino, which was a welcome change from all the moody, brooding boys she had known. Kiba persuaded us to assist his sister in bottle feeding the puppies. On the one hand, these are puppies. On the other hand, I'm anxious I hear his mother's. "A nasty woman." Enko laughed. Intense Kiba claimed that since she can smell fear, it is crucial to avoid displaying it. "Doishi's an Inuzuka." "Yes, in any case. Listen, I didn't want to say anything, but why don't you apply for a paid internship with T and I if money is a concern for you? If you don't like it, at least you'll have references to bring to another department." "I'm capable of that." "Absolutely. That you weren't going to say anything a euro? What did you mean?" "Well, a euro," Enko said, looking irritated. "Look, I'm really trying not to cause any drama, okay? Is that Naruto?" Enko gave a nod. "How about Naruto? Around the time of your graduation, he specially requested that you not receive a scout letter for the department." "So I could have had an internship months ago?" Hinata blinked. "Well, you could have been asked to apply a euro, and I probably would have received it, wouldn't I?" Enko nodded. Hinata pressed on her temples. I despise him. He doesn't tell me about any of this foolish stuff he does. You know he was going to let that kid Gaara live with us after he resurrected him." She stabbed the salad she had been eating angrily and pushed it into her mouth before continuing. "I wasn't even asked." With a harder frown, Enko said, "That's fucked up." "All right. I understand that he likely needs the training trip to deal with whatever it is, but I wish he had thought to discuss it with me first. And he's been having trouble paying for groceries, our rent, and other expenses apparently. It's bad enough that his sensei will discuss it with me. But God forbid he brings it up to me." Hinata persisted in slashing angrily at the leaves in the bowl. "All right, that's all you're going to start in T and I. So screw whatever Naruto wanted. I'm sure you can handle the grunt work, and the pay is good. I will locate a job for you." "That sounds like a lot of trouble for you, though," Hinata said, blinking. "Don't worry, it's not finding a position. Simply means that I'm forcing jobs on you. It's nothing significant. We'll give you a stipend if we can't get you a good wage, which you can use to pay your rent." "Really? What do you have planned for tomorrow?" "Well, Kiba and I were going to meet, cancel, and come down to our offices." Hey, you?" Through the phone, he could almost feel Hinata's smile, which was a welcome change after being tortured by Jiraiya for the entire week. "Naruto? How have you been, my dear? You're where? First of all, I want to say sorry for ignoring you for a month." "Yeah, you should be, but I have better things to be angry with you about. How could I have hurt you from halfway across the nation? A few months prior to my graduation, I tried in Konoha. According to Anko, you asked the scouts to skip me." "Oh no, I apologize. However, you wouldn't have enjoyed T and I anyhow. It's depressing, and paperwork makes up half of the work. You're not into that." "Well, tell that to Anko because she got me a position as her secretary." "Why would Anko need a secretary at all? So you work there now?" "I'm set to observe my first ever interrogation on Tuesday. Actually, third if I count yours, but I'm told yours are unusual." "Correct, Naruto. I'm seriously so mad at you about this. You said you were done parenting me." "Hey, okay, in my defense, the T and I thing happened before we had that conversation." "But you didn't fix it afterwards, did you?" He sincerely regretted making this call. "I guess I didn't." "No, Hinata. What is so wrong about me wanting to keep you safe?" "It's not your choice where I work, you bastard." "Oh no, it sounds bad when you put it that way. A euro. It is bad, Naruto. Don't ever do something like this again. The words, "I won't, I'm sorry, a euro," should be the last thing you say." "Good." Before she dared to ask, "So how have you been? Found her yet?" They lingered in the quiet for a while. Nope, I don't think we're even close. To be honest, we're keeping busy, though I'm getting a decent handle on using this one move. It's like a chakra cloak and it minimizes damage and makes my hits harder, but the minimizes damage part means Jiraiya throws a bunch of jutsu at me to test it, and sometimes it's not strong enough. I broke my collarbone the other day. Oh, it's mostly healed. I think we went to an outpost that was nearby. They had a medic nin, but anyway, I have weird news. A question was hummed by Hinata. Jiraiya, he knew my mom. Hinata was quiet on the other end of the line. He tried to imagine what she was thinking at the moment while licking his lips and looking at the floor. He was still unable to understand it, not at all. It seemed that he'd known he had no parents. Since he'd known anything at all, he had long held them in high regard until he met Hinata, who made him realize that families could also be the source of an individual's discontent. Nevertheless, he had a strong desire for one. And now he had listened to Jiraiya more intently than he had ever listened to anything else, including briefings from T&I sessions. Her name was Kushina Uzumaki. She wasn't married when she had me. What else? He showed me a picture of her. From the records, she was a ninja. She had really long, red hair. That's an Uzumaki thing, apparently. He had no idea that Uzumaki was anything more than a random last name that someone had scrawled down for him on his birth certificate, but now it was someone's. His mother had given it to him, but Hinata had stubbornly claimed it as hers as well. Perhaps she was crying when she said, "Naruto, that's wonderful." He wanted to give her a hug right away, but he couldn't tell over the phone. He had forgotten what it was like to be by himself for this, since they had each other to cling to for world-flipping news in recent times. He was unable to adequately convey his happiness at learning that he had a relative who resembled him. Jiraiya says I look like her a lot. I don't really see it. Buddha Euro. Does she also look ridiculously tired all the time? No, she looked happy in her picture. I mean, it wasn't really professional. Jiraiya said you're a lot like her. She drawled, don't get a complex now, but she still sounded pleased. What else did he tell you? Jiraiya had undoubtedly told Naruto more, but he was unable to recall it, which made him start. Which was simply inanely inappropriate. He had always wanted a family, so when he was given a few tidbits of information about one, he went and promptly forgot about it in less than 2 days. She specialized in sealing, and a euro. He would never forget the one thing. She died in the Kyuubi attack. Oh, Naruto, a euro. You know how I was born the day of? She had me, and then she became a casualty. Instead of petting each other when they were upset, Hinata's voice said, hey, she'd be so proud of you, Naruto. Over the lump in his throat, he coughed and said, there's no way of knowing. I am, and I'm like her. So a euro. Feeling a little lighter, he laughed once more. I'm really sorry I haven't called before now, and really sorry about the T&I thing. Don't stress about it right now, just work on training and finding the lady so you can come home. I'm trying juries out on whether Jiraiya actually is or not, but we're making progress with some things. Okay, be safe. No worries, it's just me and Jiraiya. We've been camping most of the time. All we've got to worry about is snakes. Good evening, I'm Danzo Shimura. Standing in the doorway like a vampire, Gaara blinked at the man who had interrupted his solitaire game. Good evening. The man lowered a picnic basket to reveal, and maybe a break from prison food. I hate to distract you from your cards, but I was struck with the notion you might like company. Gaara responded, I've been told time and time again not to call this a prison, taking each card individually, putting it back in the deck, and then slipping it into the small paper box it had come in. Ino gave him the cards, a box of young adult novels, some candy, and a dirty magazine that she had first persuaded the guards to let him keep and then persuaded him to keep. The elder said, well, you can speak plainly in front of me, as he slowly sat down in the chair across from the redhead and started to open the gift he had brought. A tin of what appeared to be hummus, half a baguette, sliced fruit, cheese, smoked meats, and a bottle of sparkling melon-flavored soda that was so cold it made Gaara's mouth water. The guards could still report my insubordination. Do you see any guards? Danzo asked with a smile, and Gaara was a little taken aback to see that they were alone in the room. There was nobody in the hallway, but the door was open. Normally he could sense chakra from the hallway, but this time it was very evident. Simply put, he could run. However, he refused in order to gain favor with the superiors and a place on Konoha's force. He had remained here for weeks on good behavior, and he would not be able to accomplish that if he fled. You aren't afraid to eat with me without a guard? He asked, turning back to Danzo. I don't need a guard to feel safe. Gaara put a thin piece of bread, spread side down, into his mouth after Danzo handed it to him. Liberally slathered with the nutty paste, a mouthful of the melon drink instantly brought back memories of his lunch breaks back home. The flavors were so flawless and pure that Gaara asked right away. Why are you here, Danzo Shimura? Benignly, The one-eyed man layered slices of meat and cheese on a piece of bread for himself and said, "I'm the reason you are in this room, Gaara. And if you get out, I'll be the reason you do. I've been questioned, psychoanalyzed and otherwise probed for a month. I've told you everything I know forwards and backwards," Gaara stated with anger. "Is there another language you'd like me to say it in so you understand? You have told us everything you know about the attack, who was involved, and your resurrection," Danzo said cautiously as he handed him some grapes. "What I am still unsure about is where your loyalties lie," Danzo said. "I will not betray Naruto." Danzo grinned and said, "And there we have it." Gaara realized he had misspoken before the explanation arrived. "You are loyal to Naruto, and who is Naruto loyal to?" God, that shouldn't have sounded like he was looking for a response, to you? "I'm afraid that's questionable as well. You think Naruto is working for someone else?" "Oh, heavens no, nothing as treacherous as that. Naruto is, as you may have noticed, driven by the whims of his conscience. You're alive because of it." He had not enjoyed this food at all, even though it was the best he had had in months. If someone with an agenda against Konoha happened to elicit some sympathy from him, who is to say he won't overlook a few unsavory details about them to do them a kindness? How am I to prove to you that I am an asset to Konoha and only Konoha inside this cell? His gaze met Danzo's. "I was hoping you'd be open to a little test of your patriotism." First tense, then awkward, then just annoying. The silence seemed to go on forever. Tsunade said, "It's been a long time," and she raised an eyebrow. "That it has," her former teammate concurred. Orochimaru appeared as good-looking as ever when she realized that A. He wasn't interested in her and most likely not in women in general, and B. He was a megalomaniac who detested basic human decency. Her crush on him from their childhood faded away. However, the term, human, was no longer appropriate for her former teammate. "What have you done to yourself, exactly?" Before she could remember herself enough to understand that she did not want to fall for his crazy games, they nearly escaped her lips. He exuded joy as he said, "I'm afraid I have some sad news. Our dear sensei has departed from this mortal plane." Her attendant's huff of annoyance at her rudeness informed her that she had succeeded in fooling someone with her distance, but not the intended recipient. "I thought he died, like, a year ago." Orochimaru's smirk widened as his strange tongue protruded to taste the air. "If you weren't careful, demons could taste your emotions," and it appeared she had become careless in concealing them since she'd last seen her ambiguously dressed teammate. No, the news of her sensei's passing did not leave her unmoved. The death of people you knew was something you could never truly get used to. Through snake-like fangs, he uttered, "That's so cold, Tsunade, and here I thought you were a softie. Well, we're all surprised by what a bitch I am sometimes. If only Dan was here, I bet he could convince you to behave more like a lad." His own attendant caught the senbon Shizune had hurled at him for the insult as fast as lightning. She hadn't anticipated that the gangly, four-eyed boy would be her teammate. Instead, he looked like a true bookworm. However, there were numerous aspects of Orochimaru that she was unaware of. Her shoulders were too heavy for the words. "Get out of here before I kill you," she said. "I can bring him back, you know. I know what you can do, Orochimaru." Tsunade gritted her teeth and spoke. "I know how you do it. I know every step of the ritual, and all of its components." "Then you know that I can just as easily bring him back without binding him to myself?" Orochimaru asked. "That I can bring him back, and not be able to lay a finger on him once I do? Don't act magnanimous, it doesn't suit you. You will get your loved ones back, and all I ask is that you assist me with the project." Dan Nawaki Tsunade, you have no idea how delighted they will be to see you. In an attempt to read her, Shizune turned to face her with large, frightened eyes. Tsunade hoped she was hiding her emotions well enough because she knew what Orochimaru would taste if he stuck his repulsive tongue out at her once more. "I'll give you time to consider it. A week will be back," and he was gone. A week seemed like a very long time.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.